On a cloudy day in a chicken restaurant, two people sit and have chicken drumsticks. One of them is a Sagittarius saint named Hugo Otters, who tells the other person that he is going to die the next day. In response, the other person, a 13th awakened named Li Jian, does not take it seriously and asks why Hugo wants him to die so badly, calling him by the name Otaksu. In response, Hugo reminds Li Jian that his name is not Otaksu but Hugo Otters, which causes Jian to laugh. After a while, Jian assures Hugo that he will not die so easily and tells him not to worry too much. Confident in his ability, Jian states that the number of calamities he has killed alone is way too much than all of the 12 saints combined. Hugo remains silent in response, although an expression of worry lingers on his face. We are then told about the Demon Tower, a dangerous place known as the spot where the worst calamity annihilated human lives. It all started on the last day of the 20th century, when calamity suddenly appeared, driving humans into a corner with overwhelming power. Just as humanity started to fall, the 12 divine beings appeared and promised to empower humans to overcome the calamities, and they selected 12 awakened individuals for that. However, unexpectedly, the 13th awakened appeared, who had not received any blessings from any of the divine beings. Surprisingly, this awakened individual was overwhelmingly strong and amazing compared to the rest of the 12 individuals referred to as the 12 saints. This awakened person is Li Jian, the protagonist of the story and the one who made it possible for the 12 saints to conquer the Demon Tower. During their quest in the Demon Tower, Hugo, the Sagittarius saint, approaches Jian, commending him for his role in the conquest. In response, Jian, calling Hugo by the name Otaksu, states that he does not need lip service but fried chicken for the next 5 years, prompting Hugo to ask if he will never get sick of that. Hugo also reminds Jian that his name is Hugo, not Otaksu, causing Jian to remark that he can never get used to that name. Meanwhile, the other saints discuss how eliminating Crimson Eye will lead them to receive incredible rewards, expecting at least 100 billion won considering the calamities level. While they are talking about that, Jian intervenes, saying that they should at least settle for being able to stay in a 7-star hotel for the next 10 years. Putting on his face mask, he states that several countries are on the verge of bankruptcy due to the Crimson Eye. In response, one of the saints remarks that in order to make deals with them, Jian needs to have a lot of money to fix his damaged face and injured body. Leaving the conversation, the saints walk away while Jian stands behind, thinking that even though they are called saints, they are nothing more than thugs who only care about themselves. While he ponders that, they turn around once again, forbidding him from reaching any destroyed site immediately, saying that they need to create more victims to get a greater reward. Annoyed by their cruelty, Jian decides to sever all his connections with them once they defeat the Crimson Eye. Meanwhile, the other saints who go ahead of him reach a place in the tower and look ahead, feeling shocked. In front of them sits the formidable boss of the Demon Tower, the Crimson Eye, with fierce intent in its eyes. The monster is so dangerous that they all feel pressured by just a single gaze from it, which even leaves Jian surprised. While they contemplate how to defeat the monster, it lets out a loud roar, causing the entire tower to shake violently, leaving them shocked. Suddenly, the ground beneath their feet, as well as the walls of the tower, begin to crack, followed by a blast that created havoc. As it continues to roar, the floor in the middle of the tower breaks, causing a huge surge of light to emerge from it, leading all the saints to fly up alongside the light. The intensity of the light is so high that it even breaks the roof of the tower and touches the sky. After some time, as the light begins to fade away, the saints tremble with fear as they stare in front of them. The floor of the tower in front of their eyes turns into a giant pit filled with lava. On the other side of the pit sits the formidable Crimson Eye on its throne with a cruel expression on its face. Engulfed in shock and trembling with fear, they get up to run away, considering that they cannot fight such a powerful monster and should save their lives instead. While they are running away, Jian looks back at them while standing in his place and ponders how such cowardly people can be called saints. Holding his sword tightly, he decides not to care about them, thinking that he will be the one to defeat the Crimson Eye. Thus, with fierce intent in his eyes, he smiles and leaves his spot, leaping up in the air to launch an attack on the monster. However, just as he launches the attack, he himself gets stabbed on his back and falls into a trap, where he remains for a long time, forgetting about the outside world. Considering that he doesn't have time to think about the world outside the tower, he keeps slaying formidable monsters endlessly. However, the surge of monsters never finishes because the trap he has fallen into keeps summoning infinite calamities. During this never-ending battle, he even loses one of his arms, but still stands confidently in front of the monsters, holding a sword in his hand and a dagger in his mouth. He is still confident enough that the monsters' attacks will not be able to take his life, and he will surely survive. Just like this, he kept fighting against them for 20 years. After 20 years, he finally reaches the administrator of the monsters, who is shocked to find him there and asks how he managed to reach that point. Jian, now much older yet stronger, stands in front of it, and it feels scared, calling other monsters for help. Stating that there is no one left to help it no matter how much it screams, Jian uses his foot to crush the monster, causing it to die instantly. After killing the monster, Jian stands in front of it, wondering if the long battle is finally over and if he can finally get out of the tower. However, as he starts to walk away, he crashes to the ground, having lost all his energy, and gets engulfed by a strange darkness. Meanwhile, outside the tower, in the city that looks more like a destroyed arena, two children run to save their lives. While running, one of them says that he told the other one not to go there, and the other one replies that it was supposed to be safe that day. As they run away, they are followed by high-ranking calamities that seem to have appeared without any warning. After a short while, the calamities catch up to them, leading them to believe that their death is near. Just then, one of the monsters leaps up and collides with one of the children, causing him to crash to the ground. As they both sit powerless on the ground, more and more monsters start to gather around them. Feeling powerless, one of them wishes for Jian to have survived the demon tower, stating that if he were there, these calamities would not be a problem. Just then, the doors of the demon tower began to slowly open, leaving them shocked. Suddenly, a bright light emerges from the tower, followed by an earth-shattering blast that causes them to become confused. As the dust settles from the destructive blast, a large pit filled with lava emerges from within. Trapped under the rubble, the children ponder what it could be. Suddenly, one of them looks up in shock and urges the other to look in the same direction. In front of them stands a human figure emerging from the collapsed demon tower. This person, who turns out to be Jian, clenches his fists and expresses his anger towards those who betrayed him and led him into the trap. With fierce determination in his eyes, he declares that all those who deceived him will die at his hands. Concealed amidst the rubble of the fallen demon tower, the children sit in shock, witnessing the unbelievable scene unfolding before them. Meanwhile, Jian stands before their eyes, effortlessly slaying formidable monsters like insects with his bare hands. Watching him, the children express their astonishment, remarking that those are orange-class calamities that even highly ranked awakened individuals struggle to defeat. Yet, seeing Jian dispatch them like mere bugs is beyond belief for them. While they discuss amongst themselves, Jian suddenly senses their presence and turns towards them, suspecting that they might be monsters hiding within the rubble. In a sudden leap, he jumps into the air, confusing the children, and lands in front of them, removing the debris and exposing them, leaving them in shock. Frightened, the children start to retreat, trembling and wondering why he would attack them, causing Jian to realize that they are humans. Considering that, he thinks that everything has been cleaned up, causing the children to take a sigh of relief. As he surveys the surroundings, the children express their shock at the emergence of a human from the tower. However, one of them considers it impossible, believing that he happened to be in the area when the tower was collapsing. Suddenly, a gigantic shadow emerges behind them, followed by the appearance of a colossal boss monster. Witnessing this, the children are overcome by intense shock and decide to flee quickly, while Jian stands steadfast, smiling. With a fierce killing intent in its eyes, the monster opens its mouth and unleashes a powerful beam, causing the children to close their eyes in fear. The monster directs its devastating energy wave towards Jian and the children, shattering even the buildings in its path and unleashing massive destruction upon the city. After the wave subsides, the children emerge from the rubble they were hiding in, surprised to have survived, and look ahead in a state of shock. Standing before them is Jian, completely unharmed by the impact of the wave, leaving them bewildered. Wondering if he saved them, they observe as Jian leaps into the air towards the formidable boss monster and swiftly descends upon it. Unleashing a powerful wave of energy from his fist, Jian directs it towards the monster, causing it to crash to the ground, leaving the children in awe. Finally, when he reaches the ground, the boss monster is already lifeless, and the two boys stand frozen in shock. Believing that it is truly over this time, Jian looks at the two children behind him and calls out to them. Turning to face him, he instructs them to go, confusing them about where to go. Abruptly changing his expression to a lively one, Jian tells them to go and buy him some food, leaving them perplexed. He then adds that they should also buy him some clothes. Some time later, in a fast food restaurant, Jian sets down an empty bowl of noodles on a table while the boys sitting in front of him gaze at the bill in astonishment. As they express their shock at how much he ate, Jian remarks that he held back a little because he doesn't have enough money, leaving them frustrated. Saying that they promised to buy him everything he wanted as a token of thanks, he turns to the waiter once again, asking for another bowl of soup, which makes the boy angry. Just then, one of them asks who he is and what he was doing around the tower. In response, Jian, who is busy picking his teeth, reveals that he came out of the tower, leaving them shocked. Changing the topic, he turns to the boy, asking who he is and stating that he does not seem like a normal person because he can sense magic in him. In response, the other one reveals that the boy named Jimin is a disciple and inquires if Jian is also a disciple who awakened with the blessings of the divine being. However, Jian disagrees, stating that he does not need to serve them. Just then, he notices his reflection in the spoon and feels shocked to see that his face is no longer as damaged as it used to be. Consumed by shock, he asks if there is a mirror somewhere, and the waiter directs him to it. Reaching the mirror, he removes his shirt and examines his body, feeling surprised to find his entire body recovered. Remembering how his skin, hair, and even teeth used to be severely damaged, he examines all those, thinking that those were difficult to recover without risking his strength. He also feels surprised to notice that his left arm, which was cut during the battle against monsters, is back. While examining his left arm, he suddenly notices a mark of a snake on his palm and wonders what it is. Suddenly, that mark turns into a real snake, causing intense pain in his body and leaving him shocked. Just then, he is informed that because he experienced death, all of his achievements will be passed onto a new body, and his zodiac skills will enable him to use the power of Ophiuchus. Just then, he slowly opens his eyes and then closes them once again, getting transported into an open space. When he opens his eyes again, he finds himself floating in space in front of a gigantic snake. Feeling shocked and confused, he extends his arm to touch the snake, and as soon as his hand makes contact, the snake's body begins to emanate a bright light. As the glow becomes brighter, he suddenly finds himself back in front of the mirror, sitting on the floor with his body sweating. Confused, he stares at his reflection when the boys, standing in front of him, ask if he is okay. Turning to them, he asks if they did not see the gigantic snake. In response, Jimin states that he did not, and Jian just took off his shirt, ran to the mirror, and later grabbed his wrist and screamed. Looking at the mark of the snake on his palm, Jian wonders if others were not able to see it, while the boys stand quietly, thinking of him as strange. Just then, the bright light emerges in front of him once again, notifying him that he has become the master of Ophiuchus. As he stands still above the bright light, countless notifications begin to rush in, informing him that he has gained a super regeneration skill along with a 50% decrease in his physical ability. This makes him realize that his physical change was a result of the super regeneration skill, thinking that the saints never told him that they could see such windows. Also, he cannot feel the presence of any divine beings, yet, considering that his body has recovered, he does not think of it as a bad thing. Therefore, he decides to kill all the saints that ran away from the tower and seek revenge from the person who stabbed him in the back. Therefore, he becomes excited for the quest, leaving the boys trembling with fear due to his strange personality. Meanwhile, news of the Demon Tower collapsing spreads throughout the city, attracting numerous agencies and broadcasters. Gathering around the rubble of the destroyed building, they consider it a significant event for the entire world. Observing the pile of rubble, people speculate that the demolished tower was a landmark of the place, pondering whether Li Jian's followers, the disciples who hated him, were responsible. However, as they look at the dead monsters, they doubt that even the higher-ranking disciples could have achieved such a feat and wonder who killed them and destroyed the Demon Tower. Contemplating this, they question if Jian truly survived in the tower and returned, deciding to wait and see in order to confirm. Meanwhile, in a large building, a ceremony goes on with countless cameras focused on a person named Yang Wei. Turning to him, reporters start inquiring about his thoughts on the tower's collapse and whether there is a chance that Li Jian is still alive. In response, Yang Wei, the heiress saint, refuses to address the question and walks away. While sitting in the car to depart, he vents his frustration upon hearing Li Jian's name mentioned countless times that day. He considers Jian's survival and his 20-year stay in the tower impossible, believing that defeating countless black-ranked demonic beasts would have been unachievable. Puffing on his cigar, he believes that escaping from there could only happen by miracle, an impossible feat for anyone. He reassures himself that Jian's body has already been ravaged by the recoil of his power and that he hasn't received any blessings from divine beings like the saints. However, he still fears that if Jian has indeed survived, it would be disastrous for them as everything would be over. Meanwhile, Jian, who is busy watching something on the phone, decides to eliminate one specific person first. At an airport in England, an aeroplane lands and a person emerges from it, receiving a warm welcome from the people who consider it an honor to meet him. The person turns out to be Hugo Otters, the Sagittarius saint and Jian's best friend. Exiting the aeroplane, Hugo inquires about the Prime Minister's location and is informed that he is waiting at his residence with a vehicle prepared to take him there. Upon hearing this, Hugo instructs them to head directly there, proceeding ahead while the people standing there consider him to be very dignified. Observing his humble personality, they believe that a person like him is a true chosen one. While traveling in a car towards the Prime Minister's residence, Hugo remains quiet, gazing out of the window when suddenly his phone starts ringing. Assuming the call to be from reporters, as before, Hugo becomes frustrated, perceiving their continued involvement in the conspiracy theories surrounding John's survival. The constant ringing from an unknown number irritates him, and he flips his phone, remarking that it has already been 20 years. Afterwards, he resumes looking outside, reminiscing about the time he told Jian he would die the next day, but Jian ignored it as a joke that could never come true. He remembers that during the raid on the Demon Tower, he was taking care of the monsters outside the tower at Jian's request. He prayed a lot for his prophecy to prove wrong and for Jian to return alive. However, the other saints abandoned him, leaving him inside, only to return with the head of the Crimson Eye. As a result, their achievements were widely acknowledged, and they were regarded as heroes who gained a lot of power and authority. However, Hugo was never ready to believe that Jian really died and requested the search of the tower countless times. However, the other saints refused to do that, stating that he should know about the danger of emerging monsters and calling the fact that Jian was alive nonsensical. They told him that if he wants to look for him desperately, he can go inside alone, but it would only lead to his death, reducing the number of saints to 11. This both enraged and discouraged him from entering the tower again, despite desperately wanting to do so. Remembering that time, Hugo feels remorseful and continues to look out of the car, thinking that no matter how strong Jian is, his survival is impossible, and it is already too late. While he is thinking about that, he receives a call from the Prime Minister and picks it up, asking what the matter is. In response, the Prime Minister begins to discuss the same incident of the Demon Tower falling. Holding his head in frustration, Hugo realizes that the Prime Minister also intends to discuss the same. Therefore, he apologizes to the Prime Minister in advance, saying that if they want him to search for Jian, he is refusing to do so. He shares his belief that Jian died in the Demon Tower, and the people behind this incident might be his followers. He thinks that the Prime Minister is trying to use that issue for his election votes, but the Prime Minister declines, saying that this is not the case. He reveals that according to the news that he has just received from the Korean government, the call that rang a few moments ago on Hugo's phone was from Jian, leaving Hugo bewildered. Consumed by intense shock, Hugo begins to shout and tells the driver to immediately stop the car, which he does. Sitting in the car, he looks at his phone, considering it to be unbelievable and wondering if the calls were really from Jian. He picks up the phone and looks at its screen, which displays 30 missed calls and a voicemail, which intensifies his shock. After a while, he clicks on the voicemail and brings the phone near his ear. Suddenly, he hears a familiar voice addressing him as O Takesu, telling him that he will find him and kill him and wishing him good luck. Frozen in disbelief, Hugo thinks that it cannot be true and wonders if it is really Jian. He then tells the driver to immediately turn around the car, saying that they will go back to the airport, ignoring his business in England. Meanwhile, in the fast food restaurant, Jian sits holding his phone, thinking that Hugo really grew up and learned how to ignore his calls. Looking at him, the boys inquire endlessly about whom he was calling, and he says that they will soon know. Looking at the phone, which he previously did not know about, he considers it to be an interesting gadget. Stating that it was 2005 when he entered the tower, he realizes it is already 225 and the world has become better, while the boys inform him that he can also use the internet and watch news. Interested, Jian asks if he can also read the articles about Li Jian, and they agree, stating that those articles are trending at the moment. Saying that, Jimin gets up and clicks on his phone screen, opening countless articles about Jian, making him surprised. However, reading the comments about him, he realizes that people consider him useless and think that Crimson Eye was defeated by the 12 Saints, which leads him to get enraged. Clenching the phone tightly, he states that the 12 Saints were the ones who got scared and ran away, feeling intense anger while Jimin starts to worry about his phone. However, Jian decides to maintain his composure, becoming calm once again and continuing to browse. Suddenly, he comes across an article discussing Li Jian's decision to donate all his property to charity and wonders if that was kept well. However, as he clicks on the article, he learns that the 12 Saints announced his death after leaving the tower and claimed that he passed on all his property to them in order to save humanity. This resulted in all of them, except Sagittarius, receiving a share in his property. Feeling an intense surge of anger after discovering this, Jian finally shatters the phone with his hand, vowing to kill them all and cut them to pieces. Seeing the phone get destroyed, Jimin starts to cry hard. Meanwhile, Jian wonders what to do, thinking that although he wants to announce his return, his appearance has changed a lot and people will not believe him even if he tells them. Therefore, he decides to stay quiet and deal with the Saints one by one, while Jimin keeps crying, holding his broken phone. While the other boy is calming him, Jian sits quietly with a strange energy slowly surrounding him without him noticing. Just then, he gets a notification that someone is watching him, leading him to realize the source of it. Therefore, he gets up and starts heading out, causing the children to ask where he is going. He replies that he is only going out to get some fresh air. As he goes outside, he notices countless demon-like creatures surrounding the restaurant and wonders if they are the underlings of Ares. Just then, he receives a notification that these creatures are creating a barrier and decreasing the influence of other zodiac signs, along with a request for a tribute. This enrages him, and he decides to teach them a lesson. Just then, he hears someone's voice calling his name, expressing their frustration at hearing it everywhere, and he turns around to see two people coming his way. While he watches them with confusion, one of them states that he has gotten all the attention in the news and wonders why it is happening despite him being a lost case. Looking at their badges with the sign of the Gemini zodiac on them, Jimin recognizes them to be from the Gemini divine Cater and starts to feel anxious. Noticing Jian, the people suddenly stop, while Jimin tells Jian to come back inside, stating that he should not get into an argument with those people. Just then, one of the two asks why he is blocking their way, telling him to go away, leading Jimin to realize that they cannot stop what is about to happen. Just then, the person who is smoking the cigarette takes in the smoke and exhales it on Jian's face. As he stands still in response, the person gets near him, asking if he is angry and telling him to try and hit him if he really is angry. While he is still standing quietly in response, the girl tells the person to leave him, stating that he might be scared. So they begin to move away, stating that losers like him are the ones who like Li Jian. While he is standing, trying his best to control his anger, they keep commenting on Jian being the weakest compared to the 12 saints. Just then, Jimin and his friend approach him, appreciating his efforts to keep himself composed. However, the very next moment, Jian bursts into anger and turns to the Gemini disciples, addressing them as roaches. Surprised as well as enraged, they turn back, asking if he really called them roaches, and he loudly agrees, calling them a couple of cockroaches once again. Coming back towards him, the individual asks him to repeat his words once more, referring to him as a mere ordinary person from whom he cannot even sense a trace of mana. While he is saying this, Jian extends his finger towards the person's forehead and lightly flicks it, causing the person to crash back to the ground. Witnessing this, the person's partner and the boys are filled with immense shock, while Jian stands confidently with a smile on his face. At that moment, the girl, who was previously in a state of shock, begins to counterattack. In response, Jian smiles and remarks that she was mistaken to think he would not notice her actions from behind. Turning around at a swift speed, he flicks her with his finger as well, causing her to crash to the ground just like her partner. After doing that, he confidently states that they did not even amount to that much. Addressing him, the boys worriedly ask how he can use his abilities in the middle of the street. In response, he turns around and explains that they would have been dead if he had employed his true abilities. Realizing that he has defeated the A-rank disciples with just a single flick of his finger, the children are left in profound shock. Meanwhile, Jian approaches the Gemini disciple, sits down beside him, and observes the necklace he is wearing. Taking the necklace off his neck, Jian holds it in his hand and expresses that he felt an odd sensation while striking the person, which he attributes to the necklace. He then turns to the children and inquires if it is a divine artifact, wondering why individuals like them possessed such artifacts that are typically exclusive to saints. Surprisingly, the children ask if he truly knows nothing, revealing that humanity nearly faced extinction from past calamities several decades ago. As a result, due to the difficulty of relying solely on 12 individuals to save humanity, the saints gathered followers and established divine cadres. They explain that those awakened by the saints and granted power are called disciples, ranked in accordance with their strength and fate, all under the leadership of the saints. They further disclose that selected disciples receive gifts from divine beings based on their devotion. This revelation makes Jian realize the immense changes that have occurred in the world during his 20-year absence. Just then, Jimin calls out to him, urging him to look aside, and he turns to see the same divine creatures floating in the air surrounding them. Simultaneously, he receives a notification that these creatures are enjoying the situation, urging him to eliminate the two individuals and promising a useful reward in return. Observing this, Jimin is shocked, realizing that he has captured the attention of the divine beings' households, which are like their shadows, opposing who means opposing the divine beings. Taking this into consideration, Jimin implores Jian to comply with their demands and do as they say. In response, Jian realizes that the underlings of Ares are in a place like that, striving to satisfy their hunger, just like Yang Wei himself. Consequently, he raises one of his feet, thinking that Yang Wei hasn't changed at all, and forcefully stomps it onto the ground. This results in generating a powerful wave that causes the divine creatures to disperse as if caught in a storm. The impact of this wave reaches the sky, forcing the divine creatures to flee, while Jian remains steadfast, questioning how they dared to confront him. Recognizing that such formidable demonic creatures have retreated and the barriers have vanished, Jimin comprehends that Jian is not an ordinary person. Turning to Jimin, Jian repeats their claim that the person he knocked out a while ago is the disciple of Gemini. In response, Jimin agrees and reveals that they are from the Divine Cater, the most influential force in the country, and an elite force consisting of several influential figures. Considering that, Jian thinks that these people must have a lot of money, which he can see from the branded clothes and belongings of that person. Therefore, he reaches out to that person again and starts taking all his belongings away, leaving the boys shocked. After spending a long day outside, the boys finally reach their apartments, accompanied by Jian. Pointing towards a colossal building in front of him, Jimin tells Jian about where his apartment is while his friend points to the one he lives in. After that, both of them turn to Jian, and Jimin thanks him for saving their lives and bringing them home safely. However, when he does not get any response for a few moments, he opens his eyes. In front of him, Jian stands yawning and asks if he is not going to go inside, stating that he is sleepy, making him realize that Jian intends to follow him to his house. After a while inside the house, Jian changes his clothes and cuts down his long hair, thereby undergoing a complete transformation in his appearance. After that, he comes out, and Jimin remarks that his new appearance is amazing while feeling surprised that he cut his hair. He remembers that in the past, every single strand of hair was precious to him since he kept losing hair as a side effect of his abilities. Remembering that, he feels glad at the opportunity to be able to style his hair like that. Just then, he notices something and turns aside, finding a small mosquito-like calamity and asking what a calamity like it is doing in his house. Without even turning to it, he uses his hand to effortlessly crush it, leaving Jimin surprised at his ability and thinking that even professionals would not be able to kill it. However, when such tiny calamities keep appearing and coming to him, Jian feels frustrated, while Jimin states that he might be emitting a scent that calamities are attracted to. However, Jian thinks that something in this house is attracting them and turns aside to look for it. On one of the racks, he finds certain evil artifacts placed and states that it is because of those that the calamities keep coming. In response, Jimin reveals that he received those items directly from the Gemini saint. Holding one of the statues in his hand, Jimin states that these things are blessed by the saint when Jian suddenly breaks it. While Jian stands, remarking that it is disgusting, Jimin sits on the floor, unable to believe that such a precious statue has been destroyed. Jian then takes a mask from among those items and asks Jimin if this is the artifact that monitors its buyer. Following that, he goes to the rack and begins examining all those pieces of equipment, throwing them away one by one, while Jimin continues to stare at him in disbelief. After looking at all those things, Jian realizes that the saints have not only stolen his money, but are also selling evil artifacts to people and feeding off others. Feeling very angry just at the thought of it, Jian tells him to throw all those away. Meanwhile, a person who is standing outside the door hears their voices coming from inside. While Jian is busy breaking the divine artifacts one by one, despite Jimin protesting, the person enters the house, feeling surprised. Looking at him, Jian asks who he is, while Jimin feels glad to see him. In response to Jian's question, The person reveals that he is the owner of this house, causing Jian to stop his acts. Meanwhile, in Yang Wei's residence, he receives the news that his underlings who were in Korea have suddenly disappeared, due to which their Korean branch is in a panic at the moment. This prompts Yang Wei to wonder who would do that, considering that those creatures were the direct descendants of divine beings whom no awakened individual would dare to pursue. With that thought in mind, Yang Wei instructs his secretary to contact the other saints and inquire if they have discovered any clues. The secretary complies and informs Yang Wei that the Sagittarius saint is unreachable as usual, to which Yang Wei responds that he is currently in England and they need not bother with him. However, the secretary reveals that shortly after landing in England, Hugo departed immediately. Taken aback, Yang Wei asks about where he went, and the person reveals his destination to be Korea, shocking him. Considering that Hugo was Jian's best friend, Yang Wei ponders whether the reason behind his actions is the rumors of Jian's survival. This leads him to question whether Jian has truly returned alive. Overwhelmed by anxiety and frustration, Yang Wei grabs a candle stand and hurls it in the secretary's direction, instructing him to conduct a thorough investigation into the matter. He then asks for further details, and the secretary reveals that the location where the underlings disappeared coincides with the spot where an unconscious disciple of Gemini was discovered. According to reports, the disciple had lost all his belongings and was found lying on the streets after allegedly quarreling with a handsome man. Upon hearing the word handsome, Yang Wei asserts that it couldn't be Jian, as he believes Jian's face was severely damaged. Nevertheless, he remains concerned about the recent developments, considering the rumors of Jian's return. With the divine household members having vanished for unknown reasons and their failure to conquer the Spider Queen, Yang Wei fears that his position may be threatened if this continues. Consequently, he instructs his secretary to prepare a private jet, stating that he will personally go to Korea to investigate the situation. Making this declaration, he dons his cloak and immediately sets off to conduct a swift inquiry. Meanwhile, in a Gemini-affiliated hospital in Korea, the individual who quarreled with Jian lies in critical condition on a ventilator. An elderly person standing beside him feels a surge of anger, wondering who had the audacity to harm his grandson. Frustrated, the elderly person turns to someone beside him, and that person reassures him not to worry about what transpired. Addressing the elderly man as chairman, the individual named Min Sung-hoon explains that he was dispatched by the divine Gemini Cater specifically for this purpose. Meanwhile, Sung-jae, the owner of Jimin's house, reiterates what Jimin told him about Jian, stating that they met in the Demon Tower and he single-handedly defeated all the calamities. However, Sung-jae does not believe that and instead feels enraged at Jian for breaking all their divine artifacts, while Jian continues examining them, deeming them to be fake. Surprised, Sung-jae asks which divine cadre Jian belongs to, and Jian replies that he doesn't need to be part of one. Sung-jae further inquires about the divine being Jian follows, and Jian reveals that he follows himself and not the 12 saints. Taken aback once more, Sung-jae asks about Jian's awakened class, to which Jian discloses that he belongs to the production class. Finally, Sung-jae requests Jian's name, and Jian reveals it to be Li Jian, causing Sung-jae to become overwhelmingly furious and emit flames of mana from his body. Accusing Jian of trespassing on their house, breaking their divine artifacts, and pretending to be Li Jian, Sung-jae becomes enraged, asking how he dared to impersonate Li Jian. Witnessing the intense flames of mana emanating from Sung-jae's body, Jimin grows concerned and reminds him that they are still inside their house. Just then, Jian is informed that the mana of the disciple of Gemini is exploding, which he finds cool, and he states that he is going to burn down his house like this. Just then, Jian activates his newly found skill, the Gaze of the Divine, and views the statistics of Sung-jae, realizing that he is a powerful disciple of Gemini belonging to the Punisher category. Upon seeing all of this, Jian thinks that Sungjae is already using a high-ranking summon at such a young age, calling him a genius. Just as Sungjae's powers begin to intensify, Jimin tells Jian to run away, stating that Sungjae is an A-ranked Gemini disciple and a severe Li Jian fanatic. Meanwhile, Sungjae, consumed with fury, tells Jimin to leave the house if he does not want to die. However, just then, Jian reaches behind him and forbids him to play with fire like that, leaving him shocked. Immediately, Jian directs his powers towards Sungjae, knocking him down. In a good mood, Jian asks if Sungjae plans to burn the whole building down. Meanwhile, Jimin, who stands trembling in shock, asks if Sungjae is even alive after enduring such a powerful attack, but Jian assures him that he is fine. However, when Jimin looks at Sungjae, battered and bruised, lying unconscious on the floor, he wonders if that is really the case. As Jimin reaches for Sungjae, asking him to wake up, Jian yawns and says he is going to sleep and will wake up in the morning. However, as he opens the door and enters the room, he finds countless statues of himself lying on the table. Surprised, he asks what those are. In response, Jimin repeats that Sungjae is a Li Jian fanatic, while Sungjae forbids him from entering the room, saying that he values that collection more than his life. Ignoring their protests, Jian approaches them and starts to take their heads off, stating that his old appearance makes him feel uncomfortable. Seeing that, Sungjae starts to shout, calling him crazy and telling him to stop. But Jian continues, stating that he is not crazy but the real Li Jian. This causes Sungjae to cry, feeling powerless. The next day, at a coffee shop, Hugo watches the news about the quarrel between two Gemini disciples and a suspicious individual who took away all their belongings after humiliating them. Upon hearing that, Hugo realizes that it is indeed Jian and sighs, wondering why he is doing such things. Just then, a waitress approaches him to take his order, but Hugo quickly recognizes her as Yang Wei in reality, leaving him surprised. With a cruel smile on his face, Yang Wei tells Hugo that he has not been able to contact him for quite a while. He puts his hand on Hugo's shoulder and remarks that Hugo must have thought about Jian since he is also in Korea, asking him to share whatever he knows. In response, Hugo becomes enraged, stating that this is the reason he hates Yang Wei because he has a habit of possessing other people's bodies. Suddenly, Yang Wei leaves the body of the waitress, leaving her confused about what she was doing a while ago. Meanwhile, Hugo feels enraged at Yang Wei's cruel tricks and thinks that he needs to find Jian before anyone else. Meanwhile, in the Bucheon Gyeonggi Mart while grocery shopping, Jimin asks Sungjae if that person is really Li Jian, but Sungjae declines, saying that he looks completely different. He states that Jian is a hero who saves humanity and can never be a thug like that person. However, Jimin argues that he saw him coming out of the tower and that he is really strong, considering that he might be telling the truth, yet Sungjae declines. Sungjae states that it is something his father told him, so he is certain, causing Jimin to recall that his father is the Sagittarius saint, Hugo. Changing the topic, Sungjae suggests going to the counter and paying for the things they have bought. However, just then, they hear someone shouting "thief" behind them. As they turn around to see, they suddenly collide with a person who swiftly takes out their wallets and runs ahead. Jimin recognizes the person as a Scorpio disciple due to their speed, while Sungjae feels angry that he is using his abilities to steal. As the thief continues to steal, they worry that all the items and wallets in the store will be emptied if he continues at this rate. Meanwhile, the thief steals confidently, stating that not even a saint will be able to catch up to his speed. After some time, he decides he has had enough and plans to head to the next location. However, before he can do so, Jian catches him and forcefully punches him in the abdomen, causing him to scream in agony and become shocked. Surprised to see him, Jimin asks what he is doing there, and he replies that he forgot to tell them to bring some chicken. Meanwhile, another Gemini disciple approaches, complimenting John's abilities and stating that it is not easy to catch Scorpio disciples, but suggesting that he should call the police next time. Seeing him, Jian wonders who he is and what he wants. Suddenly, both of them feel something and turn aside, finding all the people at the mart standing in shock as the building starts shaking violently. Thinking it to be an earthquake, the thief considers it fortunate and plans to run away during the confusion. However, as he starts running, the floor in front of him cracks, and a giant centipede emerges, leaving him shocked. Wondering why such a calamity would be present in the green zone, the thief decides to run away before getting caught in it. So he jumps over the monster and starts running again, thinking that even that calamity won't be able to catch up to his speed. However, just as he is about to escape, the face of the monster suddenly appears before him and tears him into shreds, leading to his death. Suddenly, a strange-looking creature with a human face appears above the monster's head as the people gaze at it in shock. At that moment, it is announced that the Spider Queen has appeared in the mart along with other dangerous high-ranking calamities, urging the civilians to quickly evacuate the place. Hearing that, the people start running towards the exit in bewilderment, followed by an endless surge of monsters that transform the area into a red zone. While the people are running in different directions to save their lives, a small child stands near the monster, crying helplessly. However, as the monster draws near with the intent to kill the child, Jian appears from behind and knocks the monster down with a single punch. The child watches this with surprise as Jian turns to him and states that he should watch where he is going, causing the child to tremble in fear. Approaching the child, Jian extends his hand and asks if the child is all right. However, to his surprise, the child starts screaming and runs away. Seeing that, he feels disappointed yet relieved at the child being unharmed and turns towards the monster he just killed, wondering why there are more calamities in the mart than people. Unable to find the reason, he looks at the deadly monsters approaching him and thinks that it has been quite a while since he has done some warming up. While traveling in a car, Yang Wei receives the news of a calamity invading a mart and feels shocked to hear that the calamity that broke in is the Spider Queen. This is bad news for him, and considering that they failed to subjugate it the last time, so they barely sealed it, Yang Wei wonders if it somehow escaped. He thinks that it would be hard for him to take on a red-level calamity on his own. He recalls that after the calamities began to appear, people divided them into 6 levels, with blue as pure, green as safe, and yellow as caution. Meanwhile, those on the orange level were considered dangerous, the red ones as the rulers, and the most dangerous, the black ones, as the monsters representing human extinction. This realization makes Yang Wei think that if a red-level Spider Queen is present, the mart might have already become a red zone. Just then, his driver asks what they are supposed to do about the mart, and after a short pause, he states that they should bury it. Thinking that no one must know about their defeat, Yang Wei orders him to say that all the people in the mart are dead and send disciples there to bury the entire building. Meanwhile, at the mart, the monsters keep appearing endlessly while the S-ranked Gemini disciple stands facing them. Suddenly, he unleashes a powerful glacial prison that causes all the monsters in front of him to freeze. Looking at all the frozen monsters, he thinks that they cannot look down on a disciple of his rank. Suddenly, cracks begin to appear on the frozen bodies of the monsters, causing the ice to break and releasing the monsters once again. Seeing this, the person feels shocked, realizing that the ice magic was easily broken by the formidable calamities. Just then, Jian appears before him, holding a lot of tin cans in his hands, and tells him to go away. Seeing him, the person wonders how he came ahead of him without him even noticing. Just then, Jian takes one of the tin cans and states that the monsters started eating humans when they couldn't find anything else to eat. Saying that, he throws the tin can towards the monsters with such force that it collides with all the approaching monsters, knocking them off, and finally reaches near the giant centipede. In response, the centipede begins to scream with a fierce killing intent in its eyes, which enrages Jian. At that moment, he leaps up at a very fast speed and uses a dagger to cut the monster into pieces in an instant. Watching this, Sung-jae and Jimin are consumed by shock, while Jian begins to receive notifications about acquiring new materials, along with his rising zodiac experience. Wondering which new materials he has acquired, he looks towards his palm, which begins to shine, thinking to try out his new skill later. Despite his 50% physical ability penalty, Jian is grateful that his movements were not bad and looks forward to becoming stronger than when he was active. Meanwhile, the S-rank ice magic user stands shocked, wondering how Jian easily took care of the monsters even though they were barely affected by his magic. He watches Jian give the dagger used to kill the monster to Sung-jae, stating that he found it at the house. Looking at him, the disciple wonders where a person like that came from. Just then, he realizes something and calls out to Jian, stating that he is the criminal who attacked their disciples, leaving Jian surprised. Remembering the two Gemini disciples he quarreled with outside the restaurant, he suddenly punches the person so hard that he gets knocked down to the ground. Afterwards, he asks how the person found it out, and the person says that it was obvious for him to know, stating that the clothes and the badge he is wearing belong to their disciple. The person reveals that those badges are divine artifacts that are only given to S-rank Gemini disciples. He thinks that the reason John is so strong must be because of the badge too. Meanwhile, John wonders when the badge was on his clothes, removes it, and breaks it using a single finger. This leaves him shocked, while Jian remains calm, stating that these artifacts are just ornaments and they were tracked by the saint, considering her nature to be the same even after 20 years. Just then, another gigantic monster appears behind them, leaving Jimin in shock, while Jian turns around and finds it to be the formidable Spider Queen. While the Gemini disciple stands shocked to see the Spider Queen, Jian runs towards it at great speed. Calling out to it, he launches a forceful punch at the monster, holding it, which causes it to crash to the ground instantly. While the civilians, as well as Sung-jae and Jimin, stare at him in shock, the Gemini disciple considers it to be insane. He finds it unbelievable that Jian charged at the formidable Spider Queen without any divine artifacts and knocked it down. Just then, a person connects to all the Gemini disciples in the mart, making Sung-jae and the other Gemini disciples realize that this voice belongs to their divine cater captain. As they respond back to him, the captain tells them to leave the building immediately, saying that the disciples of Ares will be burying the building whole. As a red ray of light begins to cover the mart, the captain reveals that Yang Wei is coming to the place personally and they have no way to stop him. He states that the Spider Queen that appeared there is something that even Ares failed to subjugate. That is why they desperately want to hide the truth by burying the entire building. The captain tells the other disciple to use his teleport skill to get out of the mart with Sung-jae, leaving him shocked considering that they only want to save their own people. As he looks ahead towards the civilians, the monsters, and Jian, who is fighting them, he contemplates it while the captain asks if there is a problem with doing so. However, after thinking for a while, he smiles and states that there is no problem at all. Realizing that he has agreed to teleport both of them, leaving all the other people behind, Sung-jae argues against his decision, saying that they are in chaos at the moment. While the person keeps standing with his back turned towards him, Sung-jae asks if he wants everyone there to be buried alive, and the person states that he is aware of the situation. However, he explains that if they tell the people that the Spider Queen appeared in the middle of the city, it would not be good for them, leaving Sung-jae confused. He explains that in response to it, the citizens will refute the divine cater, which will shake their devotion and cause the strength of the divine beings to weaken. Stating that he still has the teleportation ability that can take two people out, he calls for Sung-jae, stating that he was ordered to save him and will specially teleport him out. However, Sung-jae does not want to leave Jimin behind and states that there are a lot of other people who were not able to evacuate. Frustrated at his delay, the person asks why he is pestering him in a situation like this and states that he has no plans to be buried alive because he hesitated due to incompetent people like them. Therefore, he starts the teleportation magic and smiles, stating that he can also not ignore the orders of their captain and will get rid of those burdens, telling Sunjae not to worry about them. With that, he suddenly transfers the teleportation magic onto Sunjae, leaving him shocked and enraged. Walking towards him, the person laughs and asks if Sunjae is thinking of fighting him. He states that both of them are at completely different levels of ability and advises Sunjae to stop feeling guilty and make a wise decision instead. However, just then, the gigantic monster Jian was fighting with falls upon him, causing him to crash to the ground and get stuck under the body of the monster. Following that, Jian approaches Sunjae and Jimin, questioning why they are still there and urging them to quickly exit due to the danger. Sunjae replies that they cannot leave because the exit is blocked by calamities, and they can either use teleportation or fight the calamities to survive. They also mention that there are many injured people, and outside the building, the disciples of Ares are blocking their way. Hearing this, Jian considers the situation troublesome as the person stuck under the monster's body manages to free himself. After getting out, the person expresses anger about being trampled by Jian. Turning to him, Jian states that he was the one who abandoned other people and tried to escape himself. In response, he takes out his phone to use the teleportation magic, stating that they should try and escape themselves while he is going to go outside alone. However, as he tries to do so, the Spider Queen causes the monster to throw a net-like substance at him, entangling and shocking him. The monster then starts to pull him towards its mouth and consumes him, leading to his death. Jian watches this with a determined expression, while Sunjae and Jimin are taken aback by what they witness. Calling out to them, Jian states that he will take care of the monsters and tells them to go and take care of the injured so that they can leave immediately. He assures them that he will join them shortly. Meanwhile, outside the building, the process of burying it continues slowly. Yang Wei also arrives at the location and asks his secretary about the situation, and the person explains that the entire building has been sealed. However, he thinks that the process is progressing very slowly for something that started before his arrival. Meanwhile, the disciples who are blocking it begin to feel like their seal is not working properly, considering that something is blocking it. Suddenly, a bright light emerges from within the building, shocking everyone. This is followed by the emergence of a gigantic snake, which leaves them all frozen in disbelief. Moments later, the civilians who were trapped inside start coming out and approach the disciples, informing them that someone has killed all the calamities and request help for the remaining people. Hearing about that, Yang Wei stands shocked, considering it to be impossible, thinking that killing the spiders was something that even he himself was unable to do. Therefore, he decides to check it himself and tells his disciples to wait outside. With that, he suddenly jumps up and takes a shortcut route to reach inside the building in an instant. Once there, he is surprised to find the formidable monster lying dead in front of him. Seeing that, he wonders how someone killed such a monster and wonders who that person was. Looking at the surroundings, he finds fresh traces of battle and thinks that something must have happened inside, wondering if the Spider Queen really got hunted. This causes him to hold his head up, thinking that the issue is becoming bigger and bigger, which, along with other things that need his attention, makes him frustrated. Just then, he feels something strange and runs towards the window. Looking down in the street towards a person, he wonders why he is there and watches Hugo standing with the rescue team in front of the building. This makes him wonder if Hugo is the one who did all that, considering that it makes sense if he thinks that way. While he is thinking about that, Jian calls out to him from behind, stating that they have not seen each other for quite a while and asking why he has such a bad expression on his face. Recognizing the voice as belonging to Li Jian, Yang Wei feels utterly shocked. Meanwhile, in the street, the rescue operation continues with countless ambulances and rescue workers helping the injured. Sitting among the rescued people, Sung Jae wonders if that person is really Li Jian, thinking that despite his different appearance, his movements seem to be the same. Just then, someone calls out to him, and he turns around to see Hugo, who asks what he is doing there. In a cold tone, he inquires when Hugo came back to Korea, prompting Hugo to ask if this is the tone he should use while talking to his father. This causes Jimin to laugh while Sungjae continues to look ahead with the same cold expression. Noticing his expressions, Hugo changes the topic and states that he does not seem to be badly injured and will be fine after receiving treatment. He then asks Sungjae if he was in the mart, stating that he heard about a calamity being killed and asking if he saw the person who killed the monster. In response, Sungjae coldly agrees, causing Hugo to smile and wonder who he is after. Just then, Jimin asks Sungjae if Jian will be alright, leaving Hugo shocked. Holding Jimin by the shoulders, he inquires if he just mentioned Jeon's name and asks where he is and how he knows him, leaving him confused. In response, Jimin asks if Hugo's name is Oh Taeksu and reveals that Jian is inside the mart, has defeated the Spider Queen, and has told them that his name is Lee Jian. Shocked to hear that, Hugo asks him to tell him about it in detail. Just then, a massive blast erupts from the building of the mart behind them, causing Hugo to look behind him in confusion. Meanwhile, inside the broken building, Yang Wei tries his best to fight against Jian, who remarks that he is too much. Stating that it has been 20 years since they have met, Jian asks why he would attack him out of nowhere. However, Yang Wei still struggles to believe that he is really Jian, who came out of the tower alive. Looking at him closely, he thinks that the person indeed resembles Jian a lot, but he does not have any scars on his face, and his voice is also somewhat similar. However, considering that he is so young to be Jian, Yang Wei turns to him and asks how he dared to impersonate Li Jian, stating that he got scared for nothing. Hearing that, Jian stands confused while Yang Wei continues, stating that he should have known his place and not gone against him. Saying that, he rushes towards Jian to attack him, but Jian, with a single punch, knocks him off the building, asking how he can think of it as a lie. While he is still in the air, Jian reaches the opposite side of him and kicks him like a football, crashing him to the ground. Landing in front of him, Jian states that people like him really need to learn a lesson and asks if his life became better after getting rid of him. Stepping towards him, Jian states that he heard about how they stole all his assets and forged his will, making him even more anxious. With a cruel expression on his face, Jian states that he is going to kill them all and will start with him, destroying his house, his divine cater, and all his divine artifacts. This causes Yang Wei to get shocked, and he thinks that he cannot let this happen. He thinks that the way this person speaks and acts does not seem like bluffing, and he was unable to see his movements when he attacked. Considering that, he wonders if the person is really Li Jian, who came back after surviving the tower. However, considering it impossible, he gets up once again and says that if he is really Li Jian, then he should try to prove it to him. With that, Yang Wei rises into the air, emanating a strange energy, and summons his special powers, which lead to the appearance of the Ares owner, the Jade Emperor. Observing this, Jian smiles, considering it to be only a partial manifestation of the divine being. Just then, Yang Wei makes a single finger movement, causing magical chains to emerge from the ground and restrain Jian. Yang Wei asks if Jian thought of them as too weak and proceeds to summon countless swords and weapons, forming a circle around Jian. Activating his royal skill, known as the Divine Being's Weapon, Yang Wei directs all the weapons towards Jian. Without a single trace of fear or anxiety on his face, Jian acknowledges the skill as amazing, causing Yang Wei to feel anxious. With all his might, Yang Wei directs the weapons at Jian, who remains motionless, ensnared by the heavy chains. Suddenly, all the weapons strike Jian's body, forming a massive pile of weapons where he stood. After some time passes, Yang Wei notices no movement beneath the weapons and wonders if Jian is dead. Approaching the pile of weapons, Yang Wei states that he was initially surprised by Jian's return from the tower, but he has proved himself to be as foolish as ever. He mocks Jian for attempting to fight against him, boasting about his increased energy in the past 20 years. Suddenly, the pile of swords begin to emanate a bright light. While he is staring at it with shock, the weapons start to break, and Jian emerges from within the pile, delivering a powerful punch to Yang Wei's face, causing him to crash to the ground. Lying on the ground, Yang Wei wonders how Jian survived such a massive attack and questions if he truly is Li Jian. Stating that he has finally recognized him, Jian, with a cruel expression on his face, states that he is really back. Covering his nose, Jian remarks that even the weapons of Yang Wei smell awful. Staring at him, Yang Wei feels surprised, realizing that this level of restoration is impossible even for Aquarius healers. Just then, Jian starts to get notifications that he has had a near-death experience due to which his power has increased, and he thanks Yang Wei for that. With his newfound strength, Jian confronts Yang Wei, suggesting that he should experience a fraction of his power, leaving Yang Wei scared. This elicits a serious as well as a confusing reaction from the divine being of Aries, who asks Yang Wei about how Jian survived the Demon Tower. Subsequently, the divine being of Aries abruptly disappears, cursing Yang Wei and leaving him powerless. Shocked by the divine being's sudden disappearance, Yang Wei begins shouting, questioning why he has vanished, while Jian states that he knew it was pointless from the beginning. Stating that he is quite merciful, Jian declares that he will only make Yang Wei feel the pain he has felt. Saying that, he begins to seek revenge against him. After some time, the disciples of Aries and Hugo enter the building, surveying the widespread destruction and wondering what happened there. While they are looking around at the countless corpses of monsters spread everywhere amidst massive destruction, Hugo stands still, feeling confused. Suddenly, he begins to sense a strong energy and activates his skill to view Yang Wei lying amidst the rubble beneath the building. Witnessing that, he realizes that it was definitely Jian's doing. Just then, the disciples also start to feel the same energy, considering that something was wrong. However, they find the energy to be too weak to say that Yang Wei is alive and wonder just what happened inside the building. Just then, Hugo steps forward, tells them all to back off for a second, and punches the ground so hard that a bright light suddenly begins to emerge from inside, leaving them all confused. With the impact of that, the floor of the building shatters, causing a huge hole from which Hugo reaches beneath the building and lands there. There, he finds Yang Wei lying on the ground with the note by Jian placed on him, revealing that he has gone to Yang Wei's place and causing him to wonder what his intentions are. Meanwhile, Jian reaches a colossal museum belonging to the Aries and thinks that the divine artifacts that Yang Wei stole from him must be there. Considering that, he enters the museum, where a large number of people are gathered, taking pictures of different items. Looking at a massive gold statue of Yang Wei placed in the middle of the museum, Jian thinks that Yang Wei is so obsessed with looking rich that he would flaunt his wealth like that. Just then, he begins to smell his artifacts from a specific corridor and heads in that direction. There, he finds a lot of items but finds most of them to be fake. Just then, he comes across his toothpick placed in one of the glass boxes and feels glad to have finally found his most precious item. Suddenly, all the people at the museum become attentive due to the burglar alarm that starts to ring all of a sudden, making them think that there is a thief. While Jian stands holding the toothpick in his hand, having broken the glass box, a large number of guards gather around him, telling him to surrender. In response, he smiles and says that he does not want to, and he lightly swings the toothpick, causing all of the guards to experience a stormy wind that knocks them all to the ground. Holding the toothpick, he states that it feels good to use something that he is familiar with and summons his most precious divine artifact, Lime, an adorable-looking creature. This discovery of the divine artifact leads him to unlock various new skills as well as enhance the older ones. Placing Lime on his shoulder, He states that they should start heading out when he comes across a door from which he senses the strong energy of Aries' divine artifacts. Considering that it would be disappointing for him to leave empty-handed, he opens the door and enters inside to collect the items belonging to Yang Wei. Meanwhile, Hugo reaches the museum and feels surprised, wondering if he has gotten too late as he watches the people rushing out of the museum that is engulfed in flames. This scene leads him to feel overwhelmed as well as frustrated. Meanwhile, Jian emerges from the museum, holding a huge sack filled with divine artifacts and stating that he has started to feel hungry. Just then, Hugo, who is standing in front of him, calls out to him, making him feel surprised. Suddenly, Hugo starts to run towards him with tears in his eyes. As he reaches for him, Jian states that they cannot be friends anymore, but to his surprise, Hugo ignores him and reaches for the person coming behind him, thinking that person to be Jian. While Jian stares at him in shock, Hugo starts talking to that person, asking if he should have told him if he was alive and inquiring about his well-being. Feeling angry at being ignored, Jian turns to him and kicks his face, asking if he doesn't even remember his face. As he lies on the ground, Jian says that he should be beaten up to understand that there are some things he should never confuse. Bewildered for a moment, Hugo looks at Lime sitting on Jian's shoulder and wonders if the person before him really is Jian. In response, Jian asks if he needs a beating to come back to his senses, addressing him as Otaksu. This makes him realize that he is indeed Jian, causing him to get up and hug Jian tightly, leaving him confused. In response, Jian punches his abdomen, asking why he is hugging him out of nowhere, causing him to laugh and state that he really is Jian. Suddenly, he gets a notification that the divine god of Sagittarius, Apollo, has appeared, leaving him confused. Just then, a bright light emerges behind them, leading to the appearance of Apollo, leaving them both confused and shocked. After a moment, Apollo opens his eyes while Hugo and Jian stare at him in confusion, wondering why he is showing up suddenly. Suddenly, Apollo starts to gaze at Jian, leading him to feel confused when he gets a notification that Apollo is questioning his survival and requesting to check if he is really Li Jian. Upon Hugo's inquiring, Apollo says that something will happen if he shoots Jian with a flaming arrow and aims at him, leaving him confused and shocked. Turning to Hugo, Jian asks why Apollo is aiming at him right after appearing, but Hugo reassures him that it is fine as long as he is okay. However, just then, Jian's tone changes, and he states that Hugo needs to pay him back, making him confused. With a cruel smile, Jian states that he will kill him, leaving him shocked. Jian explains that when he comes back out of the tower, his house is sold, his will is forged, and all his divine artifacts are missing. Therefore, he states that he wants to hit Hugo at least once and raises his fist, hitting him so hard that he crashes to the ground. Smiling with tears in his eyes, Hugo states that it really is him, feeling glad to have finally found him. Just then, a large number of guards emerge from the museum, recognizing Jian as the one who stole the divine artifacts. This makes Jian realize that he was being chased, while Hugo inquires about what he stole. Pointing to the huge sack, Jian states that these are the few things he stole. Looking at the sack, Hugo realizes that he has stolen the entire vault of Yang Wei, to which Jian asks if he didn't do well. This causes Hugo to laugh and call him crazy. Meanwhile, the guards state that they need to catch him right away, but their head reveals that he is not someone of their caliber. He reveals that they have called someone who matches his monstrosity, against whom he will not stand a chance. Just then, a stormy wind suddenly began to blow, leaving Hugo shocked. In the next moment, a creature with huge wings leaps up in the sky from above the museum's roof, and the head of the guards states that it is finally here. Just done, the monster jumps down to the ground, revealing itself to be the household divine of Aries, the beast of riches, Pishchu. After landing in front of them, the gigantic creature begins to roar. Seeing it, Hugo advises Jian to simply throw away the things he stole and run, while Jian tells him to stay still. Stating that he is a person with a plan, he turns to Lime and asks for his sword. In response, the body of Lime begins to emanate a bright light, and its eyes glow with the symbol of a sword in them. After some time, it erupts a sword from its mouth, and Jian grabs it, smiling confidently and standing in front of the monster. Jian holds a small dagger-like sword and thinks that using it against the household divine would be tough. So he tells the sword to show him its original form. Suddenly, a strange energy surrounds him, leaving Hugo confused. This energy transforms the short, ordinary-looking sword into a giant, formidable, and powerful sword, which Jian finds somewhat usable. Following this, he receives a notification that the divine artifact has awakened due to the power of Ophiuchus. As a result, the sword has been given a critical head attribute, sharpened, and its attack power has increased. Considering that he has acquired the new skill called the 13th Sense, Jian smiles and looks at the creature, able to clearly see all of its weak spots. Being able to see that, he lifts his sword and leaps up, determined to wreak havoc. Watching that from a distance, Hugo thinks that it is typical of Jian to attack first and that he always manages to defeat the challenges directed at him, even if they appear reckless. Considering that, he smiles, encouraging Jian to defeat the enemy. However, just then the monster lifts his foot in the air and seemingly crushes Jian under its feet, leaving Hugo shocked. With fierce intent in its eyes, the monster stands confidently when its foot suddenly begins to tremble. Just then, Jian emerges from underneath the foot, holding it up with a single hand of his, and states that it is now his turn. Shocked, the monster stares at him when Jian, with a single strike of his sword, cuts the foot of the monster, causing it to experience immense agony. Just then, he gets a notification that the beast has started to use its abilities, making him confused. Suddenly, the monster begins to roar loudly and starts sucking up all the riches in its surroundings. Seeing this, Jian smiles, stating that it would not have been beaten up if it had stayed still. With that, he holds his sword up and leaps up in the air once again. Activating the trait of snake catch, he strikes the sword onto the ground with such force that it shatters the ground, hitting the beast and causing it to fall down. Following that, the destruction starts to spread far and wide, leaving everyone shocked while Jian stands still, smiling with confidence. Looking at the massive destruction caused by a single strike of his sword, Hugo realizes that Jian's power is the same as when he was in his prime. Meanwhile, Jian stands confidently in front of the formidable beast lying on the ground and receives a notification that his zodiac experience points have increased by defeating the beast. Following that, he receives a notification asking whether he would like to bring that beast into his household, leaving him confused. Considering that he has the ability to control the household divine that only the 12 saints possessed, he approaches the beast and touches it, causing a bright light to engulf the beast. This causes the beast to rise once again, followed by a notification that it has now come under Jian's household, becoming his underling. Following that, the beast decreases its size to be hugged by Jian, its new master, while Jian thinks that since it is the beast of riches, it can be used by him to store all his treasure. Looking at Jian holding the beast, Hugo realizes that he has turned the household divine into his underling and wonders what happened before his return for him to have gained such ability. Just then, Jian receives a notification that he can give a name to the beast. After some thought, he suggests the name Piggy Bank for it, leaving Hugo shocked at his use of such language. At night in Hugo's house, he vents his frustration on Jian, calling him a traitor and stating that he does not know how worried he was for him. Meanwhile, Jian, who is busy fixing his divine artifacts, states that he got married and was enjoying life with his family while his friend was stuck in the tower. He continues to voice his complaints and disappointments caused by Hugo, intensifying his frustration. Getting up, Jian states that he will not be able to stay at his house, but Hugo says that he can stay there since he lives alone. Thinking that he might be divorced, Jian tells him to cheer up, leading him to explain that this was not what he meant. Deciding not to discuss that further, Hugo asks about what happened in the tower, thinking that both his wife and his son are fanatics of Jian and he should not tell them about him. Hugo mentions that he was fighting outside the tower and thus doesn't know what happened inside, and he asks why the other saints were carrying the head of Crimson Eye instead of Jian. In response, Jian reveals that there is a sad story behind it, explaining that he was backstabbed and thrown into a trap where numerous calamities were swarming. To make matters worse, the supposedly dead Crimson Eye came back to life, shocking Hugo. Jian clarifies that the Crimson Eye they saw wasn't its real body. He discloses that the real Crimson Eye was deep inside the tower, and he eventually managed to defeat it. However, the real problem was not the Crimson Eye but the tower's administrator, who had the power to revive the dead calamities, but he somehow managed to fight his way out. Finally, at the end of a struggle, he killed the administrator and collapsed after using up all his strength, leading to his death. However, he reveals that after he woke up, those monsters were no longer in the cave, and he is not aware of how he obtained his current abilities. However, Jian is certain that the person who backstabbed him knew about the complete structure of the Demon Tower. Therefore, he wants to teach them all a lesson, especially the one who betrayed him, and he wants to prepare for that. To do so, he needs to create equipment to use against them, so he activates his creation workshop skill. The interface asks if he wants to use materials to make a divine artifact, confusing him. After a few moments, a log of usable materials appears, including those obtained from defeating various monsters. Looking at all the materials, Jian decides to experiment by using them all to create an artifact. Thus, the creation of divine artifacts commences, engulfing the entire house in a bright light. Finally, the creation of a divine artifact is complete, resulting in the formation of Ego, an imitation horse that can absorb the magic power of anyone the owner touches. Examining it, Jian considers it great, thinking that a divine artifact with an ego can grow on its own, while Hugo starts applauding, surprised by Jian's ability. However, as Hugo looks closely at the horse, he remarks that for high-grade equipment with an ego, it doesn't look that cool. Enraged by his comment, Jian asks if he is serious, mentioning the amount of effort and materials he put into making it. Stating that he was thinking of using the remaining material to make equipment for Hugo, Jian asks if he should forget about it. Hearing that, Hugo changes his statement, calling the design to be amazing, considering Jian a genius for, and calling himself insane for not treating the divine artifacts with respect. Hearing that, Jian puts the divine artifact into his sack and states that it will depend on how he performs from then on, mentioning that they need to start by dealing with all the saints. Confused, Hugo asks how they will be able to do it, considering that it will not be easy to get other saints out of their own territory. Yet Jian states that it would be enough to draw them out, saying that he takes out a royal divine artifact of Ares called the Safe of the Golden Fleece. Seeing that, Hugo remarks that it is one of the top artifacts among the royal artifacts and asks why Jian would bring it out when he cannot use it. In response, Jian starts to mock him, stating that he has heard about him having no money, so he brought it along to fund them, which angers Hugo at being called poor. Jian explains that the higher the grade of the divine artifact, the more materials it would cost. He shares the idea of using it to multiply their materials and make high-grade divine artifacts they can use. Hearing that, Hugo asks how they are going to do it, stating that there is no one among them who can activate it. Upon this, Jian asks if Hugo cannot use it, but Hugo explains that he is not the Aries saint but a Sagittarius saint. Although Jian understands that, he still thinks that Hugo can use it. However, Hugo believes they should find another method since he cannot do that. Jian reveals that he has already sent a declaration of war to the broadcasting station, leaving Hugo shocked. Frozen in disbelief, Hugo asks him to repeat what he said, while Jian calmly states that they need to think of another way. Realizing what Jian has done, Hugo, engulfed in shock, starts to call him a crazy person. Meanwhile, in the Blue House, an official meeting goes on where one of the participants insults all the other members for being unable to kill one spider and getting humiliated. The person speaking is the Leo Divine Cater captain named Oliver, who continues insulting the others even as they request him not to use such words. In response, he states that he has heard about someone unknown who has killed the Spider Queen and asks if Li Jian really came back alive. This causes them to burst with anger when the Gemini Divine Cater captain remarks that Oliver seems to be too obsessed with the heroic stories of Li Jian. However, Oliver thinks that if it is Jian, he can surely do that, giving the reference to the subjugation video, yet the Gemini representative argues that it was only possible because of the buffs and weapons. He states that if they had received that kind of support, they would have done better, causing Oliver to laugh as he remarks that they do not seem to have received it, which led to their failure. However, the captain still insists that they were the ones who killed the Spider Queen due to the sacrifice of their S-rank disciple. This causes Oliver to mock them, stating that he was not aware of them having such a powerful person on their team and that they will have to look for it in the Spider Queen's stomach. This turns the mood of the meeting extremely serious, and the head of the meeting feels frustrated, wondering how the Blue House ended up becoming a den for such thugs. Just then, a person hastily opens the door and enters the room, telling the president that something significant has occurred and asking him to watch the news. In the news, the broadcaster reveals that their station received a mysterious package a while ago. Inside the package were pictures of Yang Wei, along with a note that read, "I'm back," the handwriting analysis of which confirmed that it was from Li Jian. As Hugo watches the news, he feels shocked and turns angrily to Jian, asking why he would send such a thing. Jian explains that it is simply a declaration of war and a notice for them to prepare for their impending death. However, Hugo states that Jian killing Yang Wei was already a major problem, and he should not have made such an announcement. In response, Jian reveals that Yang Wei is not dead, surprising Hugo as he continues to explain that although Yang Wei is alive, he is not truly living. Confused, Hugo stares at him when Jian suddenly turns to him, holding a large stuffed bunny, and says that this is Yang Wei, leaving him annoyed. Jian reveals that under his zodiac sign, Ophiuchus, he has acquired several constellation skills, including the Creation Workshop, the Gaze of the Divine, and the 13th Sense. Additionally, he has also gained super regeneration skills, the Body of 100 Poisons, and the Battle Divine Instinct, making him much stronger than ever before. Looking at the stuffed bunny, Hugo feels shocked, wondering if it really is Yang Wei. Meanwhile, a voice similar to that of Yang Wei keeps coming out of the bunny, asking to be let go. Jian reveals that his abilities have gotten pretty good from the experience in battle, allowing him to restrain souls. Surprised, Hugo asks if it is even possible, but Jian changes the topic, considering it to be unimportant at the moment, and hands him a knife, confusing him. Jian reveals that the knife was the one stabbed into his back, putting him into the trap. Surprised, Hugo looks at the knife, thinking that, from its appearance, it does not look like an ordinary weapon. Hugo shares his belief that if Jian was stabbed, then it definitely wasn't Yang Wei. This prompts him to state that he will find and drown that person to death while torturing Yang Wei. Turning to Hugo, Jian tells him that he is going to the Divine Artifact store for a bit, and he asks the reason for that. Jian explains that Yang Wei told him he had seen that engraving somewhere in the store. Afterwards, Jian asks Hugo to lend him some of his clothes, and Hugo tells him to check the closet. After changing his clothes, Jian hands the bunny to Hugo, referring to it as slave number 2, and instructs him to guard the house. Hearing that, Hugo asks if there is a slave number 1 as well, and Jian states that it is him, leaving Hugo feeling enraged. Meanwhile, at the Broken Museum of Ares, a team of investigators from Aquarius arrives and looks at the destroyed surroundings. One of them contacts their leader, telling her that they cannot find the Ares saint there and cannot sense any divine energy either. Hearing that, the Aquarius Saint Sophie Marty expresses her confusion about where he went. Her assistant shares the suspicion that he disappeared with all the wealth, prompting her to state that it would be quite bothersome if he made a deal with another saint behind her back. As she wonders where he went, her assistant shares the belief that Li Jian might have kidnapped him. Hearing that, she begins to laugh hard, stating that her jokes are not funny and uses her water energy to hit a servant standing behind her. Realizing that she is frustrated by her remark, the assistant quickly apologizes to her, stating that she said something unnecessary. In response, she assures her that it is okay and states that she will be heading to the store to sell her divine artifacts to prepare funds for the drachma auction. While she is busy on the call, another of her assistants enters the room, informing her that other saints have also applied to participate in the auction, leaving her shocked. Meanwhile, in a gym, people look in surprise while a strong and muscular person is busy doing a hard weightlifting exercise. Just then, another person appears from behind and informs him that Li Jian's divine artifact will appear in the auction. Hearing that, the person throws the barbell away and smiles excitedly. The person, who is actually the Leo Saint Stephen Marker, turns to his assistant, stating that those divine artifacts will be theirs. After some time, in front of the divine artifact store, Jian and Sung Jae appear through teleportation. Jian remarks that it is quite a convenient method, while Sung Jae tells him that despite being an expensive method, it is free for Gemini affiliates. In front of them is a colossal divine artifact store complex. Turning to Sung Jae, Jian thanks him, stating that he was looking for an appraiser, and he introduced him to an SS Rank 1. In response, Sung Jae smiles, stating that it was nothing while thinking about his captain, who was impressed a lot by Jian defeating the Spider Queen and promised to support him fully. Just then, he receives messages from his boss telling him to try and convince Jian to join their cater, and he takes a sigh. Looking at his expression, Jian asks if his boss is bothering him after that incident and puts his hand on Sung Jae's shoulder. Jian then gives the dagger back to Sung Jae after converting it into a divine artifact, stating that he used it well against the monsters. Looking at the dagger, Sung Jae states that it was rusted before, but Jian tells him that he fixed it and that its effects are a little different, telling him not to be surprised later. Hearing that, Sung Jae thanks him while he looks in front of him, asking if it is the place. Looking at the huge building in front of them, Jian inquires if this is the place where the SS rank appraiser is. Meanwhile, within the artifact store, the people stare in surprise, wondering if someone like that can be in such a place. In front of them stands Sophie, the Aquarius Saint. Reaching the store manager, Sophie states that she has to sell some divine artifacts to the appraiser before the auction, but the manager tells her that the appraiser is busy with someone else. While feeling deeply angered from within, she smiles, stating that it is all right and she can wait around the area. After that, she begins to wait in front of the building while wondering who is inside it. Meanwhile, inside the building, Jian looks at different artifacts placed on the shelves, feeling amazed at their high prices and ranks. In the meantime, the appraiser, looking at one of the divine artifacts brought by them, asks if Sung Jae made this, and Jian turns to him, stating that he made it. Hearing that, the person who is an SS-ranked Virgo affiliate, Jin Myung, asks if he has some sort of connection with Li Jian. In response, Sung Jae tells him that the person is a pretender to be Li Jian, and Jin Myung tells him to go away for a moment so that they can have a conversation. Complying, Sung Jae turns away while Jin Myung turns to Jian, asking him about his relationship with Li Jian and prompting him to ask why. Jin Myung states that most people do not know about it since he is famous for combat, but he is a legendary producer. Myung states that he has seen countless counterfeits in his life, but the artifact he has brought is different, and he can feel Li Jian's handiwork in it. Hearing that, Jian remarks that he knows a lot about Li Jian. In response, Myung agrees, stating that he is his disciple who received his favor, leaving Jian shocked. Jian thinks that he does not remember ever taking on a student. Considering him to be a liar, Jian wants to punch him, while Myung views the artifact closely, stating that his skills are quite impressive, which makes him seem like a direct student of Li Jian. He then shows an old notebook to Jian, stating that this is the item that he received after Li Jian recognized him as his student. Looking at the notebook, Jian remembers that this was the notebook that he lost. This makes him realize that Myung is the person who chased him around China, thinking that he has grown pretty old. Meanwhile, Myung continues to state that Jian gave him such useful information. Myung tells him that one day Jian left his lodging, leaving the notebook with production notes behind, making Jian realize that the notebook he thought he lost was actually stolen by him. Stating that the handwriting is very bad and he cannot understand it, Myung shares his belief that it might be Jian's book of ideas, while Jian knows that it is his hit list. He thinks of getting some useful information from an SS ranker like Myung. Meanwhile, Myung closes the notebook, states that it can be of more use to a talented young man like him, and gives it to Jian, telling him to keep it. Jian, holding the book, remembers that he had some designs he wrote down in the notebook, so it was a little disappointing when he lost it. Thinking that, he applies his magic power to the notebook, causing it to react and evolve into a divine artifact. Observing this, Myung realizes that it is a memory-storing divine artifact and acknowledges that Jian possesses a skill he has never seen before. Just then, another person enters and informs them that something has happened, and Myung asks what the matter is. In response, the person reveals that the saintess is waiting outside. Hearing that, Myung wonders why the people are so flustered about the saintess, while Jian feels surprised to hear about her. Meanwhile, outside the building, Sophie stands waiting with a huge crowd gathering around her, taking pictures. Looking at them, she wonders why they are staring at her, thinking that this happens whenever she goes out. Standing among the crowd, Sungjae wonders what she is doing, thinking that she only appears in official settings. After some time, she decides to go in and meet with him herself, thinking that the appraiser must buy their divine artifacts at a high price for them to afford the auction funds. Therefore, she walks towards the door while the manager stops and states that there is already a guest inside, making her wonder who the person is to treat her like that. Ignoring the manager, she enters the shop and finds Jian standing at the counter, feeling amazed to see such a gorgeous man. However, just then, a huge serpent appears in front of her, leaving her in disbelief and causing her to lose her balance. Feeling scared and bewildered, she wonders what the power was that she felt a moment ago, thinking as if hundreds of serpents had coiled around her. Getting up, she starts running out of the shop, stating that he has to leave the place immediately. Seeing her leave, Myung inquires why she's leaving so soon after entering, and Jian suggests she might be feeling sick. He is informed that because a Zodiac affiliate has approached him, his divine power has been sharpened, prompting him to wonder if divine power is different from magic power. In response to that query, he receives detailed information about divine power and thinks that new things and powers keep adding on. Turning to Myung, Jian inquires if the girl that just came in was the saintess, and Myung agrees while feeling surprised that he does not know. Myung reveals that she was the saint of Aquarius, Sophie Marty, leading Jian to feel shocked. After a while, he begins to laugh, asking if she really was the saintess. In his mind, he feels shocked at her transformation, considering that he didn't recognize her for real. Though he thinks she has become prettier, her rotten heart remains the same. He thinks that if he divides the things he does not like into fish bones, pests, and garbage, Sophie is a pest who considers her skincare routine to be more important than human life. Meanwhile, Myung states that he does not understand why people consider her to be the pinnacle of compassion and self-sacrifice while she is just a cruel and selfish person in reality. Myung reveals that she was Jian's physician and attempted to collect funds gathered under his name, but the government intervened, making Jian furious. Considering that Jian is taking her name so casually, Myung asks if he is acquainted with her, and Jian states that they are old friends. Meanwhile, In the empty, dark streets, Sophie keeps running, with her assistants following her. Remembering Jian, she wonders why he had to come back at that time. Thinking about the overwhelming magic power she felt in the building, she considers that the person gave her goosebumps just like Li Jian. Therefore, she turns to her assistant and tells her to go back to the shop and figure out who the person was, prompting her to ask what to do about the appraiser. After a short pause, she smiles and states that she has changed her mind, telling them to kill them all. Hearing that, her assistant argues that the appraiser is valued by Virgo quite a lot, and they also have to sell their items, but Sophie considers them to be nothing more than impertinent fools. Taking out a necklace, Sophie states that in return for doing it, she will give her a divine artifact and lend her divine power. However, the assistant explains that using power in a neutral district is bad. In a threatening tone, Sophie asks if she is refusing to follow her orders. Feeling pressured, the assistant states that she will definitely follow the orders since her will is the will of the divine. Saying that, she sits down in front of Sophie, who gives her the divine artifact as well as the power of the divine. Meanwhile, Jian, who is still standing in the shop, begins to feel water dripping down upon him and wonders where it is leaking from. In the district of the Divine Artifact Store complex, Sung-jae walks the streets having a drink. Suddenly, he notices a lot of water on the ground and wonders where it came from when it is not even raining. Observing the water closely, Sung-jae thinks that it is faint, but he can feel mana from it. However, as he looks down at his skeleton-like reflection in the water, he feels shocked and suddenly backs off when a hand emerges from the water. Consumed by shock, he drops his drink when the water on the ground suddenly transforms into a body similar to his and crawls towards him. Feeling shocked, he wonders what it is when he suddenly hears a scream and turns around. In his surroundings, he sees all the people experiencing the same thing and feels confused about the situation unfolding before his eyes. Standing on the roof of one of the buildings, Sophie smiles and continues to use the power of the mirror of replication. She states that the ones that have been replicated are all A-rank disciples, but if ants attack in large numbers, they can even take down an elephant. Meanwhile, Sung-jae calls out to her assistant, asking why a battle skill is being used in a neutral zone and telling her to cancel it. In response, the assistant, holding a divine artifact, states that everything has been done according to the orders of the saint, so he should not complain. Stating that all this is the will of heaven, she activates the divine artifact while Sung-jae keeps stopping her from doing so. As a result, a huge ray of light emerges from the district and touches the sky. Following that, the assistant uses countless aqua powers simultaneously to ensnare the people into huge water bubbles that numb their senses. Turning to her army of water-made creatures, she states that she will go and take care of the person at the shop while they capture the appraiser. With that, the creatures transform into liquid water and surround her. Meanwhile, Sung-jae, who is trapped in one of the water bubbles, wonders how he got there and tries to use his powers to get out but is unable to do so. He thinks that he needs to get out of the prison before he loses consciousness, but slowly begins to close his eyes, his senses becoming numb. Meanwhile, in the Divine Artifact shop, a lot of water gathers on the roof, causing Jian to feel confused. Looking at it, Myung wonders if something is happening outside, remarking that a suspicious mana is lingering in the surroundings. Suddenly, the water on the roof begins to gather around Myung, ensnaring him and leaving him shocked. At the same time, Jian feels a knife at his neck, which is followed by the emergence of the assistant, who forbids him from moving. She states that she does not have any ill intentions towards him, but the saintess is displeased because of him. She forbids him from doing anything stupid if he does not want his blood to be spilled unnecessarily. She reveals that she was ordered by the saintess to kill them both, but if they apologize for belittling her and buy their artifacts at a high price, she can save their lives. While Myung is contemplating it, Jian asks if it is normal for people to swing around knives in public spaces these days. Shocked, he looks up, seeing Jian breaking the knife barehandedly and stating that it was not the case in his time, leaving the assistant shocked. Jian then turns to Myung, telling him to have them pay for the damages while Myung is still consumed with shock, considering that he broke the divine artifact of Aquarius barehandedly. Feeling enraged at this act of his, the assistant states that she told him not to move and summon the gigantic water beast. However, to their surprise, Jian defeats the beast with a single punch. Turning to the assistant, he asks if she has any more of these water beasts, stating that they feel pretty nice to punch. Meanwhile, the assistant stands shocked, thinking about how he destroyed an A-rank replication with a single strike and realizing that the Saintess was right about him. Looking at Jian standing calmly on the counter, she thinks that he is dangerous and that she has to destroy him before he can harm Suffy. Therefore, she takes out a divine artifact resembling a necklace given to her by Sophie and tells him to block its power. Stating that it was made of the high-purity mana of the Saintess, she summons orange-ranking water wolves that rush at him with a high-killing intent. Looking at those, Jian feels excited, thinking that Sophie is giving him a feast after such a long time. Turning to Myung, Jian states that he told him to take anything he liked and holds 2 unique daggers, stating that he is taking those for that time. Saying that, he leaps up and rushes towards the wolves coming in his direction. Reaching near them, he begins to strike them swiftly, remarking that the daggers are amazing. As a result of striking the A-rank summons, his experience points begin to increase, causing him to feel excited. After successfully defeating all of them, he receives a significant increase in his experience points as well as a lot of information about different powers. Meanwhile, the assistant stands still holding the necklace, considering it unbelievable for the summons of the Saintess to be killed so easily. Just then, Jian calls out to her, asking for more. Trembling, she realizes that he is not someone she is a match for, and she might die if she tries to fight against him. Therefore, she starts running out of the shop, stating that he will not get away with this. Meanwhile, Jian stands back, laughs, and states that people like that aren't scary at all. Looking at him, Myung realizes that he is not an ordinary person. Just then, Sungjae enters, asking if Jian is okay. He says that the Aquarius disciples have started an indiscriminate attack, and he barely managed to escape. Looking at him, Jian states that they just finished the fight in the shop while he looks at his destroyed surroundings, wondering what happened there. Looking at the summons, Sungjae asks if they do not belong to the Saintess, and Jian agrees, stating that sending them to a production class is just like asking him to use them as materials. Sungjae states that they need to get out of the place before more of them start to come. However, just as they are about to leave, Myung stops them. He states that 20 years ago, he followed Lee Jian around to watch over his production methods and clearly remembers his process of fighting monsters and obtaining materials from them. Considering his demonic expression and madness while fighting, Myung asks if he is Lee Jian. In response, Jian tells him to keep quiet, leading him to realize that he indeed is Jian. After that, Jian starts walking away, stating that he will come back for the materials, telling him to keep them safe and saying that he also has something to ask from him. In response, Myung bows down, thanking him and requesting that he come again while they leave. On their way back, Sungjae asks why the Saintess is targeting him, asking if she is an enemy of him, but he tells him to wait, stating that he will show him something incredible soon. Late at night in a cafe, numerous ice creams and pastries of different flavors are placed on a table. Turning to Sungjae, he states that the ice cream there is really good, telling him to eat as much as he wants. In response, Sungjae asks if it is even all right, stating that this place is very expensive. Remembering that the assistant of Aquarius dropped her precious badge while running away from the shop, he takes it out, stating that it will do a lot. Showing the insignia to Sungjae, Jian states that it can be used as a card and even stores the skills of other divine beings. Looking at it, Sungjae recognizes it to be an Aquarius insignia, stating that it even functions as an ID card and can create problems for them later. However, Jian states that they should figure it out after eating and continues to enjoy the ice cream, while Sang-jae keeps wondering if it is all right to eat. Just then, a person arrives from behind, asking Sang-jae if he likes the ice cream there too. Hearing his voice, Sang-jae quickly turns around and finds him to be the divine cater captain, Choi Sung-yik. Coming to the table, Sung-yik asks if he can take a seat with them. Looking at him, Jian wonders if he is Sang-jae's boss who was bothering him, while Sang-jae stares at him in confusion. Turning to Jian, Sung-yik greets him, asking if he is the person whom Sang-jae mentioned earlier, and Jian agrees, inquiring why he is asking that. In response, Sung-yik states that scouting out remarkable talents is also the job of a captain. Hearing that, Jian asks what he is going to bribe him with. Sung-yik reveals that one of Lee Jian's 8 divine artifacts will be going up for auction soon, asking him to take his time and think about the offer, making him surprised. After a while, he puts down the spoon, wondering if they will be going to auction his belongings, and smiles. Stating that he does not have anything to lose, Jian agrees to go with them and asks if the auction house is nearby. However, Sung-yik reveals that it is not somewhere near because the divine artifact belongs to Lee Jian and will be auctioned off at an appropriate location. Saying that, Sung-yik reveals the location to be the greatest auction house in the world, towering 16,000 feet in the sky in the wealthy fortress city of Drachma. Meanwhile, in the great auction house at Drachma, Sophie sits on a chair, trembling with anxiety. Just then, someone holding a drink calls out to her, and she turns around. Beside her sits Steven, who states that if she is just going to shake in a corner, she can go away since she is making the drink taste bad. In response, Sophie makes a bad face, thinking that Steven is never going to learn any manners, but she will have to tolerate him. Considering that Steven is even stronger than Jian, she considers it to be the safest place if she stays beside him. After a while, Steven states that the weapon of Jian that was going to be auctioned is his, forbidding her to even think about selling it. While saying that, he starts to move out, prompting her to ask where he is going, but he replies that it is none of her business and tells her to sit there and wait. As she looks at him, she decides to stay calm, thinking that it is Drachma, and no matter who that person was, there is no way he could come into a place like that. Suddenly, her expression changes as she looks at Hugo passing in the corridor beside her. Considering this to be great timing for a valuable customer to have arrived, she smiles. Meanwhile, Hugo stands in the corridor and looks around, wondering where Jian is. He talks to himself, stating that he thought Jian would be there since there are so many expensive divine artifacts in that place. Just then, Sophie calls out to him from behind, asking if he has been well. Turning around, he recognizes her while she states that it is hard to get hold of him. She remarks that he was the face of the saints for a long time, but has changed quite a lot. She satirizes him, stating that he has very few disciples compared to the other saints, while he ignores her and tells her to go away, stating that he does not want to talk to her. Hearing this, Sophie asks if he is going to ignore her again, stating that he might lose his children just like he lost his wife, causing him to stop. She states that his wife is not dead yet but might die soon, asking what he can do while his family is falling apart due to an incompetent head like him. This causes Hugo to feel enraged, and his body gets engulfed with flames, leading to a blast in the building. Emerging from the flames, he states that he told her to go away while she stands coughing due to smoke. As he attempts to punch her, she holds his arm, telling him to hold his temper, and remarks that he has forgotten the truce they agreed upon 10 years ago. After that, she summons her aqua powers, stating that Hugo should be aware of his status as half a saint. Just then, someone calls out to her from behind, and she turns around, receiving a blow from Jian that causes her to crash to the ground. Surprised, Hugo looks at Jian while Jian asks what he is doing there. In response, Hugo states that he was worried about him, making him confused. Looking at him, Jian asks if Hugo likes him, and Hugo agrees, telling him not to even joke about that. Changing the topic, Jian looks at Sophie and wonders why she appears everywhere he goes. Thinking about Lee Jian, the 13th saint, who is considered to be the strongest, Sophie trembles with fear. She remembers that she always hated him. In fact, she was scared of his face full of scars, his aggressive personality, and his cold eyes that always looked down upon her. She recalls that 20 years ago, on one particular day, Jian entered the Aquarius sanctuary despite being forbidden by the guards. With anger and aggressiveness in his eyes, he told them all to go away, causing them all to become scared. Just then, Sophie came there, asking how he dared to trespass into her place and telling him to leave. In response, he crashed her into one of the walls, causing her a lot of pain. After that, he asked if she really wanted to die. Confused, Sophie inquired why he was doing that. In response, he stated that he sent her to the rear to treat the people endangered by the calamities and asking what she was doing there. Venting his anger, he stated that their arms and legs looked like they had to be amputated all because they were injured while protecting her. Dragging her along, Jian stated that she was the one who said she would treat them and told her to hurry up and save them. In response, Sophie stated that she does not care if people like them die, and they should be happy that they saved her for the sake of humanity. She asked if he was looking down on the saints, saying that they were already being blamed a lot by people and considered useless. Sophie mentioned that she does not even have a speck of thought to clean up whatever mess there is. Hearing that, Jian turned to her, shocked, while she told him to let go of her, saying that she had to get ready for her interview. In response, Jian let go of her hand while Sophie held her wrist, remarking on his grip being so hard. However, instead of leaving, he punched her and stated that he expected too much from a pest like her, who, instead of understanding human words, needed to be told through beating up. While she is remembering all that, she suddenly regains consciousness, finds Jian sitting in front of her, and feels shocked. She finds herself tied to a chair with Jian and Hugo in the room and lets out a loud scream. Turning to him, she demands to be released at that very moment, asking how he can do that to a saintess. Turning to Hugo, Jian remarks that she has not changed at all in the last 20 years, asking how her repertoire is still the same. Hearing that, she states in her head that things are not the same as 20 years ago. She decides to distribute acidic fluid on her hands to melt the rope that is binding her and starts doing that. She thinks that a restraint like this is useless and wishes that she could seek help from Stephen Marker. However, just then, Jian flicks her forehead, causing her immense pain. Looking at her, Jian states that her tricks are obvious from her expression. Suddenly, he feels a pain in his finger and finds that it has started to melt, feeling shocked. Smiling with excitement, Sophie calls him stupid and reveals that she has an acidic protection skill that activates whenever someone strikes her body. She states that this acid will start to melt his entire body, calling it the strongest protection skill of Aquarius. In response, Jian utilizes his recovery skill and heals his finger in an instant, stating that this is his strongest skill. Seeing that Sophie is consumed by shock, wondering what it was, considering it to be something greater than just a recovery skill. Meanwhile, Jian decides to go over everything that happened between them. After that, he starts with her claim to be his doctor, her attempt to attack him, and then the thing she said to Hugo, announcing the number of hits she will receive for each of them. Hearing that, she asks him to wait, and he stops for a while and then states that the wait is over and goes ahead to hit her. While he is doing that, Hugo sits aside, enjoying his tea. Looking at them, Hugo realizes that Jian hits everyone equally regardless of their gender, but also accepts the fact that they give him a reason to do that. Just then, Hugo notices that the divine status of Jian is increasing with every hit and wonders which divine being's divine status he is increasing. After launching a few hits, Jian stops, realizing that Sophie has fainted from the impact. Just then, he is informed that his divine status has been unlocked, but charging is required, making him confused. Wondering what divine status is, he demands an explanation, and the system explains it to him in detail. This makes him realize that he can gain divine status by hitting people, but he did not gain it when he hit Yang Wei because it was not unlocked at that time. This reveals to him the prospects of getting stronger. Just then, Hugo calls out to him, suggesting he asks Sophie about the dagger. However, Jian states that she cannot be the one to stab him, and he has also found someone to investigate the matter, so it is all right. Just then, Jian puts his hand in his pocket and takes out a mobile, checking the time while Hugo asks where he got the phone from, and Jian reveals that he borrowed it. Turning to Hugo, Jian states that he has to head to the auction house, telling him to deal with the rest and do whatever he wants with Sophie. After saying that, he moves out of the room, telling him that he will contact him when the auction is over. After he leaves, Hugo turns to Sophie and wonders what he should do with her. Just then, he hears someone's footsteps and turns to the door, thinking it is Jian. However, looking ahead of him, he feels surprised, wondering why it had to be him as he looks at Steven standing in front of him. Looking at Sophie tied to the chair and unconscious, Steven turns to Hugo, feeling enraged, and asks what he was doing there. After a small pause, Steven states that it has been a long time since he met Hugo, saying that he removes his glasses, revealing his eyes glowing with fierce intent, and smiles, stating that they are not in a state to share friendly greetings. Looking at him, Hugo asks why he is there, and Steven reveals that Aquarius asked him for an alliance. Looking at Sophie lying unconscious on the chair, he states that he had some business in Drachma, so he came along. After that, he turns to Hugo, stating that it is his turn to ask questions, and inquires what he is doing there. In response, Hugo states that he had business in the auction house, which is not related to him. Hearing that, Steven asks if he is also behind Li Jian's divine artifact that will be appearing in the auction, making him shocked. Looking at his expressions, Steven asks if he really did not know and states that it will be a price that he cannot even dream of affording, so there is no point in him knowing about it. In response, Hugo grins, asking if he is still in the habit of collecting the divine artifacts that Jian makes. Hugo reminds him that he never recognized Jian's strength and felt inferior to him, but kept collecting the divine artifacts made by him. Smiling, Hugo asks if he thinks doing that can make him stronger like Jian. In response, Steven summons his overwhelming powers, causing the room to be destroyed in an instant. Seeing that, Hugo also summons his powers, thinking that Steven always reacts this way whenever the discussion of Jian is brought up. With fierce intent in his eyes, Steven leaps up and quickly gets hold of Hugo's hand, telling him not to act big. Tightening his grasp, Steven reminds him that there is nothing in front of him, forbids him to discuss Jian, and twists his arm. With extreme anger in his eyes, Steven states that he is now even stronger than Li Jian. Just then, a person enters, informing Steven about a problem. He reveals that the disciples of Gemini are buying all of Li Jian's items, shocking him. Turning to Hugo, he lets go of his hand, stating that he does not have time to waste with him. With that, he begins to move away, stating that the auction holds more importance to him than Sophie, and since they are competitors, he does not need to look out for her to that extent. Turning back, Steven states that he will give him a piece of advice, telling him to tame his personality and stay low if he wants to live. In response, Hugo smiles, stating that he is very thankful for this advice. After Steven leaves, Hugo looks at Sophie, still lying unconscious, and then examines his injured hand. He feels disappointed, thinking that he is of no use. Meanwhile, in the auction house's VIP room, the host of the auction announces that the divine artifact has been bought by Gemini. After that, she announces a short break, after which the second session is supposed to start. During the break, Jian sits in the room, feeling happy and excited about acquiring another divine artifact. Observing him, Sungya congratulates Jian and remarks that he can buy as many artifacts as he wants. In response, Jian thanks him for bringing him to the VIP room and allowing him to buy whatever he desires. However, Sungya considers it to be alright since they want to have a talent like Jian, but Sungjae asks if it's really okay, stating that the divine artifacts seem to add up to billions of won. Sungya insists that it's fine and asks if Sungjae can settle the alcohol bill, explaining that he didn't bring his corporate card. Hearing that, Sungjae thinks he has already borrowed a lot from him, but he cannot say anything since he is his superior and agrees. Just then, Jian intervenes, telling them not to worry about the bill and showing them a black card, stating that he has already paid for everything. Sung-yuk recognizes it as his own black card and checks his pockets, wondering when Jian took it. Meanwhile, Jian remarks that one should never let their subordinates pay, even if it is by mistake. In response, Sung-yuk says he was about to give Sung-jae his card and thanks Jian for helping with the payment while feeling shocked and frustrated internally. However, considering Jian to be the person who killed the Spider Queen, Sung-yuk thinks that if he can make good use of him, whatever was just paid will mean nothing at all. So, he speaks up, stating that since they have had enough drinks, they should get to the actual topic. Sung-yuk expresses high regard for Jian and believes he has the potential to become an S rank or above. As he talks, Jian feels a mind-dominating fog surrounding him that others cannot see or feel, a magic that builds trust among others. Meanwhile, Sung-yuk continues, saying that Jian can even become the successor of their saint and one of the 10 stars. He envisions Jian having wealth, honor, and the strong authority of the great magician, Saint Ares. Bringing his hands forward, he tells Jian to hold them so that he can become the disciple of the great Ares. In response, Jian starts to laugh, making them both confused. Jian remarks that the entire day is full of funny experiences and states that they want him to become the servant of a poor divine being. Realizing that it has made Jian angry, Sung-yuk thinks that he needs to change the topic and states that Jian is mistaken about something. Just then, someone calls out, stating that they have bought the auction items that were purchased by them. Thinking of their timing as perfect, Sung-yuk turns to the door and tells them to come in. After a while, a woman enters holding a tray and congratulates them, presenting the purchased auction item along with an authenticity certificate, proving that it is Li Jian's divine artifact. Looking at the item, Sung-yuk asks if Jian bought Li Jian's divine relic, and Jian clarifies that Sung-yuk told him to buy anything he wanted, calling it a very useful artifact. Thinking that Steven is obsessed with Jian's artifacts and they should not mess with him, Sung-yuk states that someone else already owns the artifact and they should get a refund. However, just then, the doors of the room suddenly break, leaving them all bewildered, and Steven enters, asking who dared to lay their hands on his items. Recognizing Steven, Jian wonders if he is the person who was aiming for the divine artifacts. Meanwhile, Sung-yuk reaches Steven, apologizing and stating that the newcomer made a mistake without knowing much, and he is returning the items right away. Hearing that, Steven calls it all right, stating that the person only needs to admit it and return the things. In response, Sung-yuk thanks him, stating that he can take his time with the payment. Hearing that, Steven smiles, thinking it fortunate that he did not have to spend even a single penny on those items. He then turns to Sung-yuk and states that they cannot think of getting away after laying their hands on what was his. This makes Sung-yuk realize that Steven is planning on saving billions by using a mistake as an excuse. Just then, Jian speaks up, telling them to stop it. He states that he has won the item and it belongs to him, not Steven, and if he wants it, they can sell it to him at a premium of 200 billion. Hearing that, Steven begins to laugh, stating that he wasn't expecting Gemini to have such bold people, while Sung-yuk wonders if Jian wants to die by doing that. Pushing Sung-yuk away, Steven states that he likes Jian, remarking that a person should be at least that courageous. After that, he reaches Jian and states that a meeting like this must be fate, and they should introduce themselves to each other. With a cruel smile, Steven states that whenever he meets someone he takes a liking to, he introduces himself very wildly. In response, Jian smiles and asks what he is talking about while thinking that his skills seem to have improved a tiny bit in 20 years. He thinks of Steven as someone who meets his expectations and has a battle spirit that cannot be compared with Aries or Aquarius. Looking at Steven's expressions, Jian realizes that he will not be satisfied until he rips someone apart. Just then, Steven tries to launch an attack while Jian stands still, amazed by his temper. A moment later, a bright light spreads in the room, followed by massive destruction, while Sungjae and Sungyuk look in their direction, wondering if Jian is alright. Meanwhile, Steven stands, remarking that it was quite fun and stating that he can spend the rest of his life comfortably in a wheelchair. However, to his surprise, Jian smiles, asking if he is shaking the dust off his shoulder for him, and appears unharmed by the light. Feeling shocked that he is unscathed after the attack, Steven asks if he redirected the attack with teleport, and Jian remarks that he is still all brawn and no brain. Introducing the skill as Rock Wall Break, Jian asks if he thinks the skill he made himself would work on him. Jian states that Steven begged him to teach him this skill, saying that he would use it to save people, but it looks like he is only using it to show off his power. Hearing that, Steven feels shocked and asks who he is. Just then, the break finishes, and the host appears once again, stating that they will begin the highlight of the auction in just a moment. Hearing that, Steven wonders if it is already time for that, while Jian sits down and looks at the screen, wondering if it is another divine artifact of his. Turning to Jian, Steven states that he has many things he wants to ask from him, but this auction is very important to him. Saying that, he walks away, telling Jian to take good care of the pendant and stating that he will come again after the auction is over. As he leaves the room, Sungjae comes to Jian, asking if he is alright. Meanwhile, Sungyuk wonders how Jian dodged the attack, considering that redirecting a Saint rank attack is impossible even for himself. Looking at Jian, he wonders who exactly he is. Just then, the host announces that the time has come for the highlight of the auction, and they will now reveal the divine artifact that they all have been waiting for. She reminds the audience of the Berlin Wolf incident that happened 24 years ago, which was about an unknown calamity that appeared on an island in Germany. She states that it was complete pandemonium that melted all weapons and armor, and even the 12 saints were unable to clear it. At that time, Li Jian appeared to defeat the calamity and used a particular artifact to do so. Hearing that, Steven feels excited and happy, considering that the legendary weapon he has seen in his dreams is finally within his grasp. He remembers that 20 years ago, in Berlin, a search mission was going on above the island where the calamity appeared. Even after 4 days of Jian's entry, no one knew what was happening inside since Jian did not come out. The other saints were unable to enter the island despite trying because of the strong poison spread in the surroundings. Steven also sat outside the island while his assistant informed him that this was the limit they could go to, and he wondered how Jian entered the place. Steven wondered what difference Jian had from the other saints that enabled him to battle against the monsters while they could not even enter the place. While he was contemplating what he was lacking that Jian had, his assistant informed him that Jian was coming out of the place. In response, he looked up and became shocked, just like the others who were waiting for his arrival. In front of them stood Jian, holding a gigantic bone, leading them to realize that he had come out alive after defeating the calamity that everyone thought was impossible to defeat. Looking at him, the other saints remarked that all their achievements had been stolen by him again. In response, Steven got up and started to walk away, telling his assistant to withdraw. Surprised, his assistant asked if he was not going to take his weapon, and he threw it away, stating that he does not need it and they can keep it if they want. Looking at Jian standing confidently among people, he stated that he has found something better and realized that what he is lacking compared to Jian is not ability but a weapon. While he is thinking about that, the host starts to pull the cloth covering the divine artifact and states that they will be revealing the strongest divine artifact used in the Berlin Wolf incident. While Sungjae and Sungyuk stand waiting for it to be revealed, Jian stands with an expressionless face, feeling confused. Meanwhile, Steven becomes increasingly excited, thinking that he is finally going to see the legendary weapon once again. Just then, the cloth is removed, and a huge bone is revealed, which Stephen considers to be the divine artifact that will make him the strongest. Meanwhile, outside the building, a strange-looking creature arrives and settles on the roof, smiling, stating that he can feel the power of Li Jian's divine artifact. After revealing the divine artifact, the Big Bone, the host asks who would want to be the owner of the greatest divine artifact, both history-wise and utility-wise. While Sung Jae and Sung Yuk express their frustration at such a great divine artifact being taken away by Leo, Jian stands quietly, thinking that he was wondering what it was. Looking at the bone, he thinks that it was indeed something he used to use before. Thinking about something, he turns to Sung Jae, trying to tell him something, but Sung Jae refuses to listen out of frustration. Sung Yuk also reacts the same way and states that he will contact their headquarters and will not let them take such a valuable artifact, while Jian stands behind feeling frustrated. Meanwhile, the host initiates the auction at $1 million, and people begin raising their bids to acquire the item. As they do so, Jian starts receiving notifications about his increasing fame. Observing the event, Jian inquires why people are spending so much money on it, and Sung Jae responds in frustration that it is because the item is a legendary weapon made by Jian himself. Sung Jae emphasizes that although he might not get it, there is a reason why people do it, causing him to feel frustrated. Sung Jae states that every item made by Jian is the best, and the people who have an interest in divine artifacts will do anything they can to get it. Pointing to Stephen, Sung Jae remarks that he is a severe case. Sung Jae reveals that Stephen has been collecting Jian's divine artifacts from all over the world, and due to his strength, people avoid challenging him when it comes to Jian's creations. However, he finds it unfortunate that Jian's divine artifacts end up in Stephen's collection, and he consoles himself by thinking that the profit goes into Jian's bank account. Upon hearing this, Jian considers it a good way to earn money and begins to enjoy the auction. When the bidding reaches $100 million, Stephen speaks up and offers $1 billion, leaving all others shocked. Coming towards the stage, Stephen states that he can even buy it for $10 billion if $1 billion is not enough. Hearing that, even the host feels shocked and turns to the other bidders, who all sit in silence, and asks if there is someone else to propose a higher bid. Hearing that, Sung Jae asks Sung Yuk to do something, but he stands silent while Jian looks into the screen with interest. After a brief wait, the host decides to sell the item to Stephen for $1 billion and announces it. Hearing that, the workers of the building who are passing by discuss among themselves that it is an amount that people like them can never even dream of and hope for a twist in the situation. Suddenly, they notice a fearsome monster outside the building, warning them to take back their words. Meanwhile, inside the hall, Stephen is congratulated as the new owner of the item and is presented with the bone. As Stephen holds the bone in his hands, with people appreciating him for the gesture, the wall of the hall suddenly begins to crack. Looking there, Stephen wonders what is happening when the wall breaks and a monstrous creature enters, causing all the people to panic. Looking at the stage, the monster announces that it has finally found Li Jian's divine artifact. It then opens its mouth and rushes towards the stage, where Stephen stands holding the glass box with the bone inside. As soon as the monster reaches Stephen, it collides with him, causing the glass box to shatter and starting to wreak havoc. Soon after, massive blasts begin to erupt from the great auction hall, shaking the entire floating island. After some time, the smoke begins to dissipate, and Stephen emerges from within, laughing hard. He states that this is the first time that he has been thankful for a calamity since it has allowed him to test the power of the divine artifact. However, the magic tower in the teleport zone starts falling apart, shocking both Stephen and Sung Jae. Suddenly, another massive blast erupts and destroys the tower, causing the rubble to fall upon the floating island. Realizing that the floating island might fall if the rubble continues, one of the people urges all the disciples to join forces and prevent disaster, to which they all agree. With that, all the disciples began to unleash their mana, directing it towards the falling debris to destroy it in the air. However, they soon realize that their efforts are futile, as the debris is too massive for them to obliterate. Just then, a power called the Fury of Apollo is unleashed, reducing all the pieces of debris to ashes in a single moment. Shocked by this incredible display of power, they all turn their gazes skyward to find the Sagittarius saint, Hugo, hovering above them. Grateful for being saved, they all turn to him and thank him. Just then another formidable monster emerges, resembling a skeleton. As the monster looks up at Hugo, he is shocked to realize there is yet another one behind him. Just then, blood starts to drip down the monster's mouth and transform into huge tentacles that begin to ensnare people. Enraged by the situation, Hugo prepares to act, but before he can do anything, he notices that the monster Steven had defeated earlier has returned and is about to attack him. Left with no defense, Hugo feels shocked and helpless. As the monster launches its attack on Hugo, Jian intervenes, delivering a powerful kick that causes the monster immense agony. Meanwhile, Hugo begins to fall, and Jian calls out to him, instructing him to regain balance as the monster crashes to the ground. Once safely on the ground, Hugo expresses his gratitude to Jian for saving him, though Jian questions why Hugo is still so inexperienced in combat. Angry at Hugo for putting himself in danger, Jian asks why he is weaker than a production type like himself, stating that he feels so uneasy while Hugo sits on the ground quietly. After a while, a verbal confrontation ensues between them, with Hugo defending that he did his best while Jian criticizes him, stating he was about to be killed by the calamity. Suddenly, they hear a loud scream and turn to see Steven approaching, angry at them for disrupting his divine artifact experience. Meanwhile, on the other side, the giant skeleton-like monster appears, roaring loudly. Turning to it, Jian realizes they have another monster to defeat. However, before they can make a move, Steven leaps up, ordering them not to interfere with his weapon's performance. Perplexed by Steven's behavior, Jian wonders why he has gone crazy again, and Hugo is left shocked. Meanwhile, Steven insists they step aside and comes down determined to defeat the monsters with his newly acquired weapon. Activating his royal skill, Steven ensnares all the people and one of the monsters within a shield, leaving only one monster outside to deal with. After that, he comes down and asks the rest of the people to wait inside the indestructible lightning storm for a moment. Facing the remaining monster, Steven declares that the stage is now set and says that the last time he used the big bone, he infused his own magical powers into it. However, this time he states that he wants to see what the big bone can do alone. The other disciples also stand behind him, encouraging and supporting him and acknowledging that he is the one who has surpassed Li Jian. Approaching the monster, Steven proclaims that it is time for it to pay the price for going berserk. With that, he lifts the bone into the air and strikes the monster's head with all his might. However, to his disappointment, the bone has no impact on the monster, leaving all the disciples surprised. Confused, Steven examines the bone closely, trying to understand why it doesn't work, while the monster remains fixated on him. Undeterred, Steven leaps into the air again and launches countless strikes on the monster's body, determined to find a way to defeat it. However, instead of harming the monster, the hits only enrage it. As a result, the monster lets out a loud roar and hits Steven with its claw, causing him to crash to the ground. Lying on the ground, Steven considers it strange, thinking that his attack really landed on the monster and wondering why the weapon is not working against it. Meanwhile, standing inside the shield of powerful lightning, Jian asks if they can get out, but Hugo states that since it is a royal skill, it would not be easy to do so. Hearing that, Jian feels enraged, vowing to make Steven pay for it after they get out, while Hugo feels annoyed at him for using a royal skill on them. Just then, Jian turns to Hugo, stating that they should take care of the monster inside the shield first. Looking at the people in front of the monster who are not turned into zombies, Jian asks if they are also calamities. However, Hugo tells him that they are the people whose minds were dominated by the calamity's ability. He says that the calamity might be thinking of using them as hostages so that they cannot attack it easily. Looking at the people coming towards them, Jian states that they will have to go head-on for this, prompting Hugo to ask if he has something in mind. However, Jian states that he does not have any plans and begins to walk forward, leaving Hugo shocked. While he is walking ahead, Hugo calls out to him, telling him to look forward, and he does so, finding a person leaping up to attack him. However, as soon as the person reaches him, Jian holds him by his head and begins to forcefully remove the blood ensnaring his body, leaving Hugo and the monster shocked. After he does this, the blood turns to its original liquid form, and the person loses consciousness. Turning to Hugo, Jian states that the person is now fine and that it is very easy for them to do it. Surprised, Hugo asks how he did that, and he replies that he did it with strength. Hearing that, Hugo lowers his head, stating that he will not be able to do it in that case. Hearing that, Jian states that he will take care of them all and has no expectations from a weak person like Hugo. Hearing that, Hugo smiles, stating that while Jian runs in, he will be covering him and summons his ignition powers to back Jian up. Thus, with Hugo backing him up, Jian smiles and begins to move ahead, determined to defeat the deadly monster. While Hugo stands behind holding a bow made of fire, Jian walks ahead, wanting to finish the battle in an instant. Meanwhile, the monster and the hostages look at him with a worried expression. Just then, he leaps up into the air, wielding his powers, and lands in the middle of the hostages, removing the blood from their bodies with his powers. Seeing that, the monster feels shocked and throws more blood in Jian's direction, but he dodges while moving forward. Evading all the tentacles of blood, Jian keeps moving forward when he suddenly looks back and wonders if the attacks were directed at the people he just saved. Meanwhile, the blood reaches the people again. However, as soon as the tentacles begin to ensnare people once more, a huge blast of fire erupts, destroying them all. Behind them stands Hugo, with fierce intent in his eyes. Looking at him, Jian smiles, calling the counterattack a nice one as expected of him. Growing even more confident as a result of his strong back support, Jian reaches near the monster and punches it so hard that it flies up in the air, experiencing immense agony. After that, its body suddenly catches fire, tearing it into countless pieces while Jian stands confidently under it. Just then, Hugo reaches for him, expressing his amusement at Jian, ending the battle in an instant. Looking at the unconscious hostages lying on the ground, Jian states confidently that they will all be fine very soon. However, he suddenly notices his hand glowing and wonders what is happening. As he looks at his palm, countless notifications begin to emerge and inform him that his divine power has increased after successfully killing the calamity. This newfound awareness makes him realize that his battle instinct has been unlocked as a result of charging his divine power. Considering that he now has a chance, he decides to try out this new skill and accepts the option of using it. Meanwhile, outside the shield, Steven stands holding the bone, but he finds himself unable to harm the monster even a little. Feeling anxious, he wonders why the big bone is not working at all, considering that he might be unable to bring out the weapon's true strength. Looking at the monster, he also considers the possibility that he is weaker than the creature, rendering it impossible for him to compete with it. Watching him from a distance, the other disciples also feel anxious, while one of them suddenly tells them to look in a particular direction. Confused, they all look in that direction, where an overwhelming power suddenly emerges from the lightning shield, followed by Jian's appearance. Watching him tear through the royal skill, Steven feels shocked and considers it impossible. Looking at Jian, the monster also realizes that Jian poses a threat and decides to focus on killing him instead of aiming for the divine artifact. Therefore, he turns to Jian and lets out a loud roar while Jian, standing in front of it, raises his head and tells it to shut its mouth. The command has an immediate effect, causing the monster to crash behind it, destroying the ground and forcing the disciples and Steven to move aside. Lying on the ground, the monster finds it impossible to believe that a human possesses such authority and asks if Jian is not human. In response, Jian lifts his foot and stomps it on the ground, further pushing the monster back. Seeing it, Steven is consumed by utter shock and considers it impossible. Thinking that only one person can have this power, he finally realizes that the person standing in front of him is indeed Li Jian. Just then, Jian turns to him, expressing his pleasure at meeting Steven and stating that he feels like Steven has been having a great time destroying his name. Trembling with fear, Steven begins to drift backward, stating that there is no way he can be Li Jian. Saying so, Steven tries to hit Jian with all his might using the big bone. However, to his shock, when he opens his eyes after the attack, he finds Jian holding the bone and smiling. Stating that he seems to be having a lot of fun with this bone, Jian barehandedly breaks the bone into pieces, asking what he will do without it. Looking at the broken bone, Steven is left in shock, while Jian states that he has been hitting him hard, and now it is his turn. With that, he punches Steven in the face so hard that he crashes onto the ground, shaking the entire building, and lets out a loud scream. After brutally hitting him for a while, Jian throws Steven down from a great height. Hearing Steven's loud screams, Sophie, who was unconscious, suddenly opens her eyes and wonders why she was sleeping there, feeling her head hurting a lot. Looking at the deep hole formed in the ground, Jian laughs, expressing his hope to meet Steven again, while Hugo feels shocked and asks Jian if he dropped Steven from such a great height. Turning to Hugo, Jian inquires about the hostages held by the monster. Hugo informs him that they have all been rescued and are quite happy. Jian then takes out Pishu and instructs it to fetch all the usable stuff from there. While Pishu is doing that, Jian tells Hugo that he has another person with him and they will take him along, and Hugo asks if it is the person who lent Jian his cell phone. In response, Jian agrees, stating that his name is Sung Jae, which leaves Hugo shocked. Unable to believe it, Hugo asks about the name again, and Jian reveals it to be Cheon Sung Jae. Jian states that he is associated with Gemini and is strong enough to be on the level of a divine cader captain, and despite being young, he is very bright. In response, Hugo holds his head in anxiety, wondering if Sung Jae really got caught up in a walking disaster like Jian. Looking at his expressions, Jian wonders what has happened, while Hugo thinks that he was being careful that his children, being Jian fanatics, never come to know about Jian being alive. However, considering the possibility of them knowing it, Hugo realizes that his family will soon be in shambles. While he is thinking about that, Jian states that the divine cader captain of Gemini can use teleportation and suggests calling him, but Hugo stops him, stating that they should leave. Confused, Jian asks for the reason, and Hugo states that he should already be sick of them and should not bother getting involved with them. Hearing that, Jian remembers his experience with them and states that they have indeed been pissing him off. Hearing that, Hugo quickly turns around, stating that they do not like him. They then begin to walk away while Jian shares that he decided to keep an eye on them but has changed his mind, and Hugo agrees, stating that those children are not worth giving attention to. Just then, Sung Jae calls out to him from behind, addressing him as father, leading him to feel nervous. As he turns around, he finds Sung Jae standing behind him, who asks if by Jian he meant Li Jian, leading him to feel pressured. Overwhelmed with anxiety, Hugo turns to Sung Jae, asking why he is there, while Sung Jae demands to know the truth, asking if the kids he was talking about were referring to him. Suddenly, the blood of the dead monster spilled in the surroundings begins to transform into tentacles once again, calling out to Jian. Hearing that, Jian turns around when the blood tentacles come towards him with great speed. However, just as they are about to touch him, Lime appears in front of him and begins taking all of them. As a result of Lime consuming them, he gains the ability of poison resistance. After staying silent for a while, Jian turns to Lime, begins to scold him for eating it randomly, and tells him to spit it out. While he is doing that, Hugo looks at the monster lying on the ground and wonders if it came out of its remains. Looking at Lime, Sung-jae feels shocked as he remembers reading about it in a book and recognizes it as Jian's divine artifact. Considering the incredible ability Jian has shown, his rough magic power, his father's friendly attitude towards Jian, and the lime he is holding, Sung-jae asks if he really is Li Jian. Realizing it, Sung-jae becomes overwhelmed with happiness and begins to scream out of excitement, intensifying Jian's frustration. Meanwhile, in the United States, at the headquarters of Leo Divine Cadre, a meeting goes on in Leo's executive meeting room. The Leo Divine Cadre captain, Oliver, states that they still haven't been able to find Castellan after their disappearance and suggests taking help from Gemini to find them. Hearing that, one of the participants in the meeting reminds him of his argument with Sung-yuk and asks if they will agree to help after that. The person also states that they have heard that the person who beat up their saint was Li Jian. Hearing that, Oliver asks if it sounds right to them, and even if it is really the case, he was still taken down by Jian's hands once before, calling him the strongest among all saints. Just then, a song in Jian's praise begins to play, leaving all the participants in the meeting surprised. Suddenly, Leo's vice Castellan Qian Yuha, sitting on the opposite side, takes her phone out, apologizes, and states that she forgot to set it on vibrate. Feeling annoyed at her attitude, Oliver states that this meeting has been arranged to find Steven and she should take it seriously. In response, Yuha asks why they even need to look for him, leaving them all shocked. Browsing through her phone, she states that he has a tough body, so he will surely survive somehow, and they do not need to look for him. Hearing that, Oliver states that as the Vice Castellan and one of the 10 stars, she should be taking action herself. Just then, she receives messages from her brother, telling her that they have a new uncle at their house and asking her to hurry up and reach home. Reading the messages, she wonders who that person will be and gets up from her chair, stating that she will be heading home and telling them to do their best. Stating that, she leaves the meeting room, causing Oliver to feel increasingly frustrated at her attitude. Meanwhile, at the Aquarius Sanctuary in Sophie's residence, countless reporters gather, demanding to know the answers to their questions regarding Li Jian. Dealing with them, her team members tell them to go away for that day, stating that she needs to rest. They state that they will give them the answers to all of their questions through an official announcement soon and request that they go back. Looking at them from a window, Sophie feels enraged at Jian and starts biting her nails, wondering how much trouble he is going to cause. She remembers facing countless people after getting out of the auction house. While walking out, her pendant suddenly began to glow and displayed a message from Li Jian, stating that he is alive and telling her to reveal the truth about what happened 20 years ago. Remembering that, she wonders what to do, considering that she will be in danger in both ways if she reveals the truth or conceals it. Realizing the trick that Jian has played against her, she feels increasingly frustrated and begins to scream loudly. Meanwhile, Jian sits in the house wondering what to cook for the meal while Hugo watches the news about Sophie refusing to give any statements to the media. Hearing that, he takes a deep breath and remarks that it is not good. The next morning, in Hugo's house, Hugo and Jian practice shooting arrows at the target. Holding a unique bow, Hugo looks at the target while Jian asks if he likes the new weapon, and he agrees, stating that they are the best and incomparable. With that, Jian begins to shoot arrows at Hugo's target, prompting him to ask if he really has to do it like that. Covering his eyes with a piece of cloth, Jian states that shooting arrows is fun. Feeling angry, Hugo states that Jian is taking away his targets on purpose, while Jian laughs, stating that making fun of Hugo is so much fun. Just then, Jian turns around to see Sung-jae holding a tray with a drink and a towel for him, and he thanks him. Seeing that, Hugo becomes jealous and walks towards Sung-jae, asking him to bring some water for his father. In response, Sungjae rudely states that it is in the fridge and he can go and get it if he wants, causing Jian to laugh. While Sungjae is mocking his father's appearance, Jian thinks that his abilities seem to have improved quite a lot and decides to check them. Just as he opens the status window, he is informed that a sanctuary of a serpent has been formed for him, but because of the low level, the space has been confined. While reading details about it, Jian is informed that Pishu can now be moved into the sanctuary, and he can also strengthen the power of the sanctuary. While he is thinking about it, Sungjae says that Jian was talking about leaving, and since he also has to leave, he suggests leaving together, prompting him to ask if it is time already. Hearing about an appointment, Hugo feels surprised, while Jian informs him that he has to meet a lot of people that day. After a while, in a restaurant, Sung-yuk sits at a table with a huge tray of fried chicken placed before him and asks if he is interested in joining Gemini. In response, Jian, who is sitting on the other side of the table and busy eating chicken, remarks that he never gets tired of it. In response, Sung-yuk states that gathering talent is a very important thing he must do despite being busy. In a threatening tone, Sung-yuk states that he must not be planning to buy items worth millions at the auction using Gemini's money and simply walk away. In response, Jian stays silent for a moment and then begins to wipe his face, making Sung-yuk think that he was really considering such a plan. Meanwhile, Jian thinks that, although he initially found it annoying, joining Gemini might be a good opportunity. After dealing with Yang Wei, Sophie, and Steven, he decides that his next target would be the Gemini Saintess. Therefore, he agrees to join Gemini, and Sung-yuk moves towards deciding a date for baptism, but Jian states that he has a condition to join. He then points to the badge Sung-yuk is wearing and demands to have it. Hearing that, Sung-yuk's subordinates become angry and state that the Saintess gave the badge to the captain herself, making it impertinent for him to ask for it. After a small pause, Sung-yuk asks if Jian wants the badge to make use of the benefits that come with being part of Gemini's divine cater. In response, Jian states that he needs something tangible that can prove whatever he claims to be correct and considers that he can at least invest that much in talent. In response, Sung-yuk asks for some time to think it over, surprising his subordinate. Jian tells him to hurry up, stating that he has another appointment after that and turns to his phone to inform Sungjae that he might be a bit late. In response, Sungjae tells him to take his time and informs him that his sister will be a little late too. Sungjae, who is sitting in an ice cream parlor, hopes Jian will like the ice cream there. He wonders how surprised his sister will be to hear about Jian and thinks that he will be able to see her shocked face for the first time. Taking out the dagger, Sungjae decides to get Jian's autograph on it when he comes. Just then, someone snatches it from him, asking why he is playing around with a dangerous thing like that. The person standing in front of him takes the dagger away and states that he will be confiscating it. He is an A-ranked disciple of Gemini named Yoon Shi-woo. Feeling enraged at him, Sungjae gets up and demands to have the dagger back, while Shi-woo remarks on the tone that he is using to talk to his superior. Looking at him, Sungjae feels enraged, thinking that just because he is a little older, he always treats him like that, and he wishes that he would be able to crush his head. Considering that Shi-woo is the son of the Libra Saint, Sungjae understands that he cannot do whatever he wants with him. Therefore, he simply asks Shi-woo to return the dagger, stating that he is not aware of what the item is. In response, the two boys accompanying Shi-woo force Sungjae to lie on the table and tell him to lower his voice, gaining the attention of all the people in the cafe. This behavior further intensifies Sungjae's anger. Looking at his reaction, Shi-woo wonders why Sungjae became so angry and asks if the dagger is something Lee Jian made or a memento of his sleeping mother. Hearing that, Sungjae bursts into anger, which causes the dagger's power to activate, sensing its owner is in danger. This causes a bright light to emerge from it, leaving Shi-woo shocked and confused. Just then, a head emerges from within the dagger and collides with Shi-woo's face, leaving everyone shocked. As a consequence of this unexpected attack, Shiwoo drops the dagger and loses his balance. Looking up towards them, Sungjae is overjoyed to see Jian standing in front of him, while Jian is also surprised at his sudden appearance. Sungjae asks how he knew to come there, and Jian states that he was at the chicken restaurant, but the consumable summon skill he left in the dagger was probably activated. Jian then turns to Shiwoo and his companions, asking if these people tried to threaten him. Turning to the two standing behind him, Jian asks how they dared to do that to his nephew, causing them to feel scared. In a threatening and cruel tone, Jian states that he will ingrain in their bones what happens if they lay their hands on something that is his, causing them to feel further scared. A few moments ago, at the chicken restaurant, Sung Yuk agreed to give the badge to Jian. Sung Yuk thought that this much is nothing if he could haul a big catch like Jian and would recover it as a special condition after Jian joins the Divine Cater. Therefore, he handed the badge to Jian, asking him to avoid using it carelessly, and told his subordinate to take out the contract for him to sign immediately. However, just then, Jian was summoned at the ice cream parlor and disappeared from the table, leaving them bewildered. Following this, they received a hefty bill for the chicken that Jian consumed, intensifying their shock. After a while in the ice cream parlor, Shiwoo's two companions lie unconscious on the ground while Jian is busy punching Shiwoo in the face. To threaten him, Shiwoo states that he is an A-rank Gemini disciple and the son of a company chairman. However, this does not have any impact on Jian, and he keeps hitting Shiwoo regardless of the consequences. Shiwoo then states that he is the son of a Libra saint, but Jian still does not stop, prompting him to ask Jian to listen to what he is saying. After getting badly beaten, Shiwoo crashes to the ground while Jian tells him to get up, stating that he is just getting started, causing him to wonder why his defense magic is not working. Enraged at such treatment, Shiwoo clenches his fists and states that Jian should not get so confident just because of something like that. With that, he summons a gigantic Palaris's bull that stands facing Jian. Looking at Shiwoo using magic in a public area, the people at the cafe start to run away to save themselves from the impact. Meanwhile, Shiwoo laughs, stating that this is a punishment for Jian for acting so arrogant. However, to his surprise, Jian stands still, stating that he thought Shiwoo had an amazing skill up his sleeve, but he would not be able to even light up a briquette with these flames. Saying that, he uses his skill to suppress the magic and acquire all the data about the Palaris's bull. Seeing that, Shiwoo feels shocked and asks if Jian was a magician. In response, Jian states that he is a blacksmith. After acquiring the skill data, the system asks him if he would want to use the data as a skill, and he states that it is now his turn to show how to really use fire, stating that he converts the data into a skill and summons a Palaris's bull behind him. Following his command, the bull directs a strong beam of fire towards Shiwoo, causing him to experience immense agony. As a result of being hit by a powerful beam, Shiwoo goes flying backward and crashes into a wall. Going near him, Jian threatens to burn him for real if he touches Sungjae again. Turning to Sungjae, Jian states that if he meets people like them again, he should just call them, assuring him that he always has his uncle's back, making him feel happy. While they are talking, Sungjae's sister, Yuha, suddenly enters and calls out to him. Observing the ruined cafe, she is taken aback and asks what caused the destruction. Stating that it is not important, Sungjae tells her to look at Jian. He praises Jian as a hero who has triumphed over numerous calamities and saved humanity countless times, introducing him as the protagonist of the movie they watched repeatedly. As they gaze at Jian, memories of his past appearance flood their minds, and Sungjae reveals that he is, in fact, Li Jian. This revelation shocks and startles her, prompting her to pinch herself to ensure she's not dreaming. She considers it impossible for him to be Li Jian, stating that he is way too handsome. She remembers that 20 years ago, he was covered with scars and states that after being in the Demon Tower for 20 years, she expected him to be in an even worse state. However, after a while, she states that his appearance is not important and smiles, expressing her happiness to see him alive and well. Just then, Sung-jae playfully intervenes, teasing her not to get too excited, causing her to feel embarrassed. Jian turns to her and warmly greets her, and she reciprocates, thanking him for helping her brother. Jian reassures her not to be nervous, stating that if she is Hugo's daughter, then she is his niece. Realizing that Jian is in a good mood, she asks him for a favor, apologizing for making a request right away, and Jian asks what it is, expecting it to be a request for an autograph. After a small pause, she is about to voice her request when a gigantic calamity suddenly emerges from the cafe's floor. This shocks Jian, causing him to wonder if it was her request all along. Looking at it, Yuha quickly turns towards it, holding a spear in her hand. Watching her, Jian calls out to her with concern, but she tells him to wait, stating that she will make a proper proposal after killing the calamity. The very next moment, she starts to run towards the monster with a fierce intent in her eyes, while Jian and Sung-jae keep standing still, gazing at her from behind. After some time, the news of the calamity's emergence of the calamity is spread throughout the city, and people are informed to quickly evacuate to the shelters. Soon after, the sky fills with dragon-like creatures, and gigantic leeches emerge from the ground, wreaking havoc in their wake. In the midst of this, Yuva stands firm, spear in hand, ready to take action. With swift and precise movements, she begins to slay the monsters one by one, her determination fueled by the desire to finish the battle quickly and propose to Jun. Deciding to take out all the monsters in one go, she gathers all their strength and swings her spear in a powerful circular motion. After that, she stomps her foot on the ground with full force and thrusts her spear upward, warning the creatures not to interfere with her proposal. Soon after, the spear strikes one of the dragons, triggering a chain reaction that leads to a massive explosion, wiping out all the monsters in one go. As she stands safely away from the destruction, Jian arrives, reassured by her exceptional combat skills, even surpassing Hugo's. Just then, she turns towards him, addressing him as uncle, when suddenly another gigantic calamity appears behind her, which she fails to notice. However, before the calamity can attack, Jian rushes forward and saves her and Sung-jae from the attack. Just then, a strange creature appears above the monster's head and addresses Jian, impressed by his ability to dodge its attack. The creature expresses interest in taking Jian as its pet, while the monster continues to emit hot lava from its mouth. The creature asks why they are playing with fire, while Jian states that it is a good chance since he needed a blast furnace to create more divine artifacts. With a cruel smile, Jian states that he will be taking it in as gas burner number 1, while the creature also smiles, considering it fun to train such a human. Looking at those creatures, Yuha and Sung-jae realize that they are from the fantasy race. Yuha states that she has to stop them, but Jian intervenes, asking why she is looking so serious and if she is thinking about fighting alone again. Jian tells them to leave that to their uncle and instead work to keep the surroundings safe. Jian states that he is leaving this task to them because he knows that they are strong and they should also trust him and leave it to him. In response, both of them smile and excitedly agree, while Jian turns towards the monster. With Sung-jae and Yuha backing him up with their powers, Jian states that it is time for them to have some fun. Just then, the creature sitting above the monster uses its rope to tie Jian up, telling him to struggle as much as he can. The creature states that this makes it even more worthwhile to train him. With that, it swings its rope roughly, causing the land beneath them to be destroyed. Amidst this destruction, Jian sits tied up by the rope. After a while, he looks up, stating that it is all style and no substance, and breaks the rope with a single move of his arms, asking if that is all it has got. In response, the creature smiles, stating that it is not the case, which causes the monster to unleash a massive fire inferno in his direction. This causes a massive, earth-shattering blast to erupt from the land. Looking at the destruction spreading, Sungjae starts directing people to quickly move towards the shelter. After successfully completing his task, he stands, feeling relieved and confident. After a while, he comes to Yuha, telling her that he has evacuated all the civilians, while she seems engrossed in the scene unfolding before her eyes. In front of her are massive clouds of smoke, covering the entire area. She thinks that even though Jian is very strong, the opponent is a fantasy race and is above a red rank, so Jian will have a tough time facing it. She is also worried about the fact that he might be facing some side effects after staying in the Demon Tower for so long and thinks that she must help him if that is the case. Thinking that, she begins to run towards the monster, telling Sungjae to hide somewhere while he keeps stopping her and reminding her of what Jian told them. Meanwhile, Jian stands still facing the monster in the middle of the city that is now turned to ashes, causing the monster to think that Jian must have faced a similar fate. However, to their shock, Jian stands unharmed amidst the flames, remarking that the flame should at least be this hot and that the ones that Shiwu used were very minute. With that, Jian gives a cruel grin, stating that he has chosen the creature as his forging flame gas burner. Staring, the creature feels shocked, wondering how he managed to survive in that fiery pit. After acquiring some of the flames from the creature, Jian summons a production hammer and gets a notification that the flame he can use in the creation workshop has been detected. After that, the system asks him to choose a subject for strengthening, and he looks at the cube of fire in his hand, stating that his subject for strengthening is this, and strikes it with the hammer. Feeling confused at what he is doing, the creature states that it will not let him do that, whatever it is. However, before it can launch an attack, Yuha comes from behind and activates her thunderclap skill, causing the monster to experience immense agony. However, to Yuha's surprise, the creature appears unscathed and blocks her attack by holding her spear. It then pushes her away, causing her to crash into a nearby building and cough up blood. Turning to its pet monster, the creature tells it that she is its meal, instructing it to devour her. In response, the monster rushes towards her and opens its mouth to consume her. However, before it can do that, someone pulls it away, leaving Yuha astonished. Standing between her and the monster is Jian, who strikes the monster so hard that it goes crashing back. Witnessing this, the creature feels shocked, wondering how Jian flung such a formidable monster like a hell lizard with his bare hands. Turning to the creature, Jian states that he will kill them if they touch her again, while a massive serpent appears behind his back. Seeing it, the creature realizes that it will be the one who will be devoured. Considering that it is a fantasy race that cannot be defeated by a human, the creature expresses its desire to end the battle there and surrounds itself with an overwhelming amount of mana. Shocked at such an absurd amount of mana, Yuha covers her eyes. Meanwhile, the creature unleashes its true form of hell wings and states that, since it is impossible to train Jian, it will acknowledge him as an enemy. Stating that it will reduce Jian and Yuha to ashes, the creature unleashes a very powerful hellbound flame, directing it towards Jian and causing Yuha to feel shocked. Soon after, another massive explosion erupts from the area, leaving the entire city in ruins. However, to the shock of the creature, Jian still stands unscathed, wearing the vinyl glove, stating that the creature is more useful than he thought. Looking at him, the creature considers it impossible for him to block the attack with a mere vinyl glove. In response, Jian smiles, stating that it will pay the price for lighting the city on fire by being the fire in his smithy for the rest of its life. We really hope that you enjoyed this manhwa. Make sure to like and subscribe for more.